The horse was defecating in my living room when my son, Scott, called for the third time that morning. From my suite at the Four Seasons in Denver, I watched through my phone screen, champagne bubbling in my glass, as Scout, my most temperamental stallion, casually swatted Sabrina's Louis Vuitton luggage with his tail. The timing, I mused, was nothing short of divine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's wind back to where this beautiful disaster truly began. Just 3 days prior, I was living a dream 40 years in the making. At 67, a widow 2 years past, Adam's slow then sudden departure, I'd finally found my peace. 43 years of marriage, 4 decades as a senior accountant at Henderson and Associates in Chicago. All that noise, all those demands, the suffocating expectations, they'd vanished with Adam, leaving only the tranquil vastness of my 80-acre Montana ranch. Here, mountains painted the horizon purple each sunset. My mornings unfolded with strong coffee on the wraparound porch, watching the mist unfurl from the valley, my 3 horses, Scout, Bella, and Thunder grazing in the pasture. The silence wasn't empty. It was a symphony of birdsong. Wind through pines, the distant low of cattle. This was the life Adam and I had dreamed of, saved for. "When we retire, Gail," he'd say, spreading ranch listings across our kitchen table, "we'll have horses and chickens and not a damn care in the world." He never made it to retirement, but I made it for both of us. The call that shattered this peace came on a Tuesday. I was mucking out Bella's stall, humming Fleetwood Mac when my phone buzzed. Scott's professional headshot, all fake smile and expensive veneers, stared back at me. "Hi, honey," I answered, propping the phone against a hay bale. "Mum, great news." He didn't even ask how I was. "Sabrina and I are coming to visit the ranch." My stomach tightened. I kept my voice level. "Oh? When were you thinking?" "This weekend." "And get this. Sabrina's family is dying to see your place. Her sisters, their husbands, her cousins from Miami. 10 of us total. You've got all those empty bedrooms just sitting there, right?" My pitchfork slipped. 10 people, Scott, I don't think. His voice sharpened into that condescending drone he'd perfected since his first million. "You're rattling around that huge place alone. It's not healthy. Besides, we're family. That's what the ranch is for, right? Family gatherings. Dad would have wanted this." The manipulation was so practiced, so smooth it made me sick. How dare he invoke Adam's memory for this invasion? "The guest rooms aren't exactly set up for—" "Then set them up, Jesus, Mom. What else do you have to do out there? Feed chickens, come on. We'll be there Friday evening. Sabrina's already posted about it on Instagram. Her followers are so excited to see authentic ranch life." He laughed, as if he'd said something clever. "If you can't handle it, maybe you should think about moving back to civilization. A woman your age alone on a ranch, it's not really practical, is it?" Before I could respond, he delivered the killing blow. "If you don't like it, just pack up and come back to Chicago. We'll take care of the ranch for you." He hung up. I stood there in the barn, phone in hand, the full weight of his words descending like a burial shroud. Take care of the ranch for me. The arrogance, the entitlement, the casual cruelty of it all. Then thunder whinnied from his stall, breaking my trance. I looked at him, 15 hands of glossy black attitude, and something clicked. A smile, probably the first genuine one since Scott's call, spread across my face. "You know what, Thunder?" I said, opening his stall door. "I think you're right. They want authentic ranch life. Let's give them authentic ranch life." That afternoon, I hunkered down in Adam's old study. First, calls to Tom and Miguel, my ranch hands, who lived in the creekside cottage. They'd been with the property for 15 years and understood exactly what kind of man my son had become. "Mrs. Morrison," Tom said when I explained my plan, his weathered face crinkling into a grin, "it would be our absolute pleasure." Then I called Ruth, my best friend since college in Denver. "Pack a bag, honey," she'd said immediately. "The Four Seasons has a spa special. We'll watch the whole show from there." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of beautiful preparation. I replaced the quality bedding in the guest rooms with scratchy wool blankets from the barn's emergency supplies. The good towels went into storage, swapped for delightful sandpaper-textured ones from the camping supply store. The thermostat for the guest wing was set to a cozy 58-hour at night, 79 during the day. Climate control issues, I'd claim. Old ranch houses, you know. But the pièce de résistance required precise timing. Thursday night, while installing the last of the hidden cameras, amazing what Amazon can deliver in 2 days, I stood in my living room. I visualized the cream-colored carpets I'd spent a fortune on, the restored vintage furniture, the picture windows overlooking the mountains. "This is going to be perfect," I whispered to Adam's photo on the mantel. "You always said Scott needed to learn consequences. Consider this his graduate course." Before I left for Denver Friday morning, Tom and Miguel helped with the final touches. We led Scout, Bella, and Thunder into the house. They were surprisingly cooperative, sensing the mischief in the air. A bucket of oats in the kitchen, some hay scattered in the living room, and nature would take its course. The automatic water dispensers would keep them hydrated. The rest? Horses will be horses. The Wi-Fi router went into the safe. My beautiful infinity pool overlooking the valley got its new ecosystem of algae and pond scum I'd cultivated in buckets all week. The local pet store had happily donated a few dozen tadpoles and some vocal bullfrogs. As I drove away from my ranch at dawn, my phone already showing the camera feeds, I felt lighter than I had in years. Behind me, Scout investigated the couch. Ahead, Denver, Ruth, and a front-row seat to the show of a lifetime. Authentic ranch life, indeed. The best part? This was only the beginning. Scott thought he could intimidate me into abandoning my dream, manipulate me into surrendering my sanctuary. He'd forgotten one crucial thing. I didn't survive 40 years in corporate accounting, raise him mostly alone while Adam traveled, and build this life from scratch by being weak. My dear son was about to learn what his father always tried to teach him, but he never listened. Never underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose and a ranch full of possibilities. Ruth popped the champagne cork precisely as Scott's BMW pulled into my driveway. We were nestled in our Four Seasons suite, laptops open to multiple camera feeds, room service trays scattered around us like we were conducting a delicious military operation. Which, in a way, we were. "Look at Sabrina's shoes," Ruth gasped, pointing at the screen. "Are those Christian Louboutins?" I confirmed, watching my daughter-in-law totter across the gravel in 5-inch heels. $800 about to meet authentic Montana mud. The convoy behind Scott's car was even better than I'd imagined. 2 rental SUVs and a Mercedes sedan, all pristine city vehicles about to experience their worst nightmare. Through the cameras, I counted heads. Sabrina's sisters, Madison and Ashley, their husbands, Brett and Connor, Sabrina's cousins from Miami, Maria and Sophia, and their boyfriends whose names I'd never bothered to learn. And Sabrina's mother, Patricia, who emerged from the Mercedes wearing what appeared to be white linen pants. White linen pants on a ranch. "Gail, you absolute genius," Ruth whispered, clutching my arm as we watched them approach the front door. Scott fumbled with the spare key I'd told him about, the one under the ceramic frog Adam had made in his pottery class. For a moment, a pang, something akin to nostalgia or regret, prickled me. But then Sabrina's voice, amplified through the outdoor camera, cut through the air. "God, it smells like shit out here. How does your mother stand it?" The pang evaporated. Scott pushed open the front door and the magic began. The scream that erupted from Sabrina could have shattered Crystal in 3 counties. Scout had positioned himself perfectly in the entryway, tail swishing majestically as he deposited a fresh pile of manure on my Persian runner. But it was Bella standing in the living room like she owned the place, casually chewing on Sabrina's Hermes scarf that had fallen from her luggage, that truly sold the scene. "What the fuck?" Scott's professional composure evaporated instantly. Thunder chose that moment to wander in from the kitchen, knocking over the ceramic vase Adam had made for our 40th anniversary. It shattered against the hardwood, and I surprised myself by not even flinching. Things were just things. This was priceless. Maybe they're supposed to be here, Madison suggested weakly, pressing herself against the wall as Thunder investigated her designer handbag with his massive nose. Horses don't belong in houses, Patricia shrieked, her white linen already sporting suspicious brown stains from brushing against the wall where Scout had been rubbing himself all morning. Scott pulled out his phone, frantically calling me. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, making my voice breathy and casual. Hi, honey. Did you make it safely? My mother's voice, sweet as poison, drifted through the phone. Before I could answer, a frantic whisper clawed its way from the screen. Mom, there are horses in your house. My breath hitched, a silent gasp that stole the air from my lungs. Ruth beside me bit down hard on her fist, her shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. Impossible, I murmured, though the image on my laptop screen, my perfectly curated living room, now a rustic rodeo arena, told a different story. They must have broken out of the pasture. A theatrical sigh from the other end of the line. Oh dear, Tom and Miguel are visiting family in Billings this weekend. You'll have to get them back outside yourself. How do I, Mom? The young voice cracked, laced with a desperation that tasted like victory. They're destroying everything. Just lead them out, sweetheart. There are halters and lead ropes in the barn. They're gentle as lambs. I'm so sorry, darling. I'm in Denver for a medical appointment. My arthritis, you know. I'll be back Sunday evening. Sunday. The word hung in the air, a death knell. Mom, you can't... Oh, the doctor's calling me in. Love you, bye-bye. The line went dead. I hung up, then switched off my phone entirely. Ruth and I clinked our champagne flutes, the crystal chiming a delicate counterpoint to the growing chaos unfolding on my monitors. The next 3 hours unfolded like a masterclass in absurdist theatre, far better than any reality show Netflix dared to produce. Brett, ever the would-be hero, lunged for Scout's mane, a misguided attempt at leadership. Scout, a connoisseur of equestrian etiquette, retaliated with a prodigious sneeze, drenching Brett's Armani shirt in equine disdain. Connor, armed with a broom, tried to shoo Bella, who interpreted it as an exhilarating game of tag, chasing him around the coffee table until he scrambled onto the couch, squealing like a child. But the true pièce de résistance arrived when Maria's boyfriend, a lanky young man I vaguely recalled as Dylan, stumbled upon the pool. At least we can swim, he declared, already tearing off his shirt as he strode toward the patio doors. Ruth and I leaned forward, our anticipation a coiled spring, the scream that erupted when he beheld the emerald frog-infested swamp that was once my pristine infinity pool was a symphony of pure, unadulterated terror. It was so high-pitched, a literal thunder rumbled from deep within the house in response. My imported bullfrogs, now conducting an impromptu orchestra, were in full, resonant throat, a chorus that would have brought Beethoven to tears. And the smell, I imagined, was truly transcendent. "This is insane!" Sophia wailed, trying to coax a signal from her phone in the living room, simultaneously sidestepping fresh equine deposits. "There's no Wi-Fi, no cell service. How are we supposed to... There's horse shit on my Gucci." Sabrina, meanwhile, had barricaded herself in the downstairs bathroom, her sobs echoing dramatically as Scott pounded on the door, pleading for her help. Patricia, ever the pragmatist, paced the driveway on her own phone, attempting to book hotel rooms. "Good luck with that," I murmured to Ruth, knowing the nearest decent hotel was 2 hours away, and the town was undoubtedly booked solid for the weekend rodeo. As the opulent fingers of sunset stretched across my array of screens, the family managed to herd the horses onto the back deck, only to discover a new impasse. How precisely to get them down the steps and back to the pasture. The horses, bless their cunning hearts, had unearthed the outdoor furniture cushions and were gleefully tearing them to shreds. Madison and Ashley had fortified themselves in a guest bedroom, but I knew their reprieve was fleeting. The thermostat, set to a crisp 58 degrees, would soon do its work. Within the hour they emerged, swathed in scratchy wool blankets, their teeth chattering. "There's no extra blankets anywhere," Ashley whined, "and these smell like wet dog." That, dear Ashley, was because they were indeed dog blankets, scrounged from a local animal shelter's donation bin. I'd washed them, mostly. By 9 o'clock, the dream of dinner had vanished like a mirage. The horses, with an almost supernatural stealth, had migrated back into the kitchen. Tom's special backdoor latch, designed to look secure but offering no actual resistance, had proven no match for equine ingenuity. Sabrina's Instagram-worthy charcuterie board was now Scout's personal buffet, and the organic vegetables from Whole Foods lay scattered across the floor like celebratory confetti. Scott, bless his heart, unearthed the emergency supplies from the pantry: canned beans, instant oatmeal, powdered milk, the same meagre provisions that had sustained me for a week when a snowstorm had first isolated us on the ranch. But for this pampered generation, it might as well have been a prison ration. "I can't believe your mother lives like this," Patricia declared, her voice amplified by the kitchen camera, sharp enough to cut glass. "No wonder Adam died. He probably wanted to escape this hellhole." Ruth's hand tightened on mine. She knew the truth. How Adam had cherished this dream, his feverish sketches of the ranch layout on napkins during chemo, making me promise to live our dream even if he couldn't. "That bitch," Ruth muttered, her eyes narrowed. "Want me to call her restaurant and cancel her reservations for the next month? I know people." I laughed then, a genuine unburdened laugh, the first in days. "No, sweet friend. The horses are handling this beautifully." As if on cue, Thunder, his tail held high, appeared in the background of the kitchen feed, depositing his unvarnished opinion of Patricia directly behind her pristine white designer sneakers. When she stepped backward, the squelch was audible even through my laptop speakers. The screaming began anew. By midnight they had retreated, a defeated army, to their assigned bedrooms. The guest wing cameras showed them huddled under inadequate blankets, still in their day clothes, their luggage either horse-damaged or safely locked in their cars, a sanctuary they were too terrified to approach. The automatic rooster alarm, a military-grade sonic weapon sourced by Tom's brother from an army surplus store and installed strategically in the attic, was set for 4:30 a.m. "Should we order more champagne?" Ruth asked, already reaching for the Four Seasons room service menu. "Absolutely," I replied, watching Scott pace his bedroom, gesticulating wildly as he argued with Sabrina in harsh whispers. "And maybe some of those chocolate-covered strawberries. We're going to need sustenance for tomorrow's show." Through my screen, I saw Scott pull out his laptop, no doubt trying to find real hotels or a large animal removal service. But without Wi-Fi, that expensive MacBook was little more than a shining paperweight. I smiled, thinking of the note I'd left in the kitchen, tucked beneath the coffee maker they'd eventually find in the morning. "Welcome to authentic ranch life. Remember, early to bed, early to rise. Rooster crows at 4:30. Feeding time is 5 a.m. Enjoy your stay, Mom." Tomorrow they would discover the task board I'd meticulously prepared, complete with mucking out stalls, collecting eggs from my notoriously aggressive chickens, and repairing the fence I'd strategically weakened near the Petersons' farm next door. Their pot-bellied pigs, true escape artists, relished new territory. But tonight I would sleep in exquisite luxury while my son learned what his father had always known. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And sometimes, the best teachers have 4 legs and absolutely no patience for bullshit. The rooster recording erupted at 4:30 a.m. with the force of 1,000 suns. From my suite at the Four Seasons, I watched Scott bolt upright, entangled in the scratchy wool blanket, his hair defying gravity. The sound was magnificent, not just one rooster, but an entire symphony I'd painstakingly layered, amplified to concert levels. "What the hell is that?" Sabrina shrieked from under her pillow. Ruth, who had stayed the night, and I were already on our second pot of coffee, fresh fruit and pastries arrayed between us like offerings at a Super Bowl party. "Is that the actual volume?" Ruth asked, wincing as Patricia's shriek joined the avian chorus from the next room. "Oh no," I said sweetly, adjusting my reading glasses. "I turned it up a bit. You know, my hearing isn't what it used to be. I need it loud to wake up." The beauty of the system was its persistence. Every time they thought it was over, another rooster would crow. I'd programmed it to continue for exactly 37 minutes, at random intervals, ensuring no one could drift back to sleep. By 5 a.m., a ragged, exhausted group stumbled into the kitchen, resembling extras from a zombie apocalypse. Ashley's hair extensions were hopelessly tangled. Brett still sported horse manure caked on his designer jeans. Maria's boyfriend, whom I now recalled was named Derek, not Dylan, had given up entirely, wearing a scratchy blanket like a cape. Scott found my note under the coffee maker. His face, as he read, was a masterpiece of evolving horror. "Feeding time?" Connor read over his shoulder. "And what feeding?" That's when the sounds from outside intensified. My automatic feeders, disabled remotely, meant 30 chickens, 6 pigs from Peterson's farm, who had mysteriously found their way through the weakened fence during the night, and my 3 horses were now congregating near the house, voicing their displeasure. The chickens specifically selected aggressive heritage breeds, including a rooster named Diablo, who'd won 3 county fair awards for most ornery fowl, were the loudest. "We're not farmers," Madison wailed, mascara from yesterday streaking her cheeks. "This is insane." "Just ignore them," Sabrina commanded, attempting to project some semblance of authority. "We'll go to town for breakfast." Scott's phone GPS helpfully informed them that town was 43 minutes away. One way. The nearest Starbucks, 2 hours. "I found instant coffee," Sophia announced, brandishing the jar of decaf I'd prominently displayed. The real coffee, hidden behind 10-year-old canned pears, would likely remain undiscovered for hours, if at all. As they struggled with the ancient stovetop percolator I'd substituted for my Nespresso machine, the animal cacophony swelled. Thunder had discovered he could bang the gate with his head, creating a rhythmic boom that echoed across the valley. The pigs, meanwhile, had found the patio furniture and were enthusiastically redesigning the outdoor seating area. But special mention belonged to Diablo. Diablo the Magnificent had discovered he could fly just high enough to land on the kitchen window ledge. The face-to-face encounter between Sabrina and Diablo through the glass was pure cinematic genius. She screamed. He screamed back. She hurled the jar of decaf at the window. He pecked at the glass with increased vigor. "We have to feed them to make them stop," Scott finally conceded, his shoulders slumping even before 6 a.m. "I'm not touching those things," Patricia declared, dropping into a kitchen chair with a wobble that only she seemed to notice. I'd skillfully loosened one leg the night before, just enough to annoy, never to injure. "Mum's right," Sabrina added, her gaze fixed on her husband. "You're the man, Scott. You and the other guys handle it." I watched Scott's jaw harden, a silent battle raging in his eyes. His father, Adam, would have been out there already, animals fed, probably astride Thunder bareback galloping across the pasture. Scott had always been vaguely embarrassed by his father's true calling, preferring to tell city friends that Adam was in agricultural technology. The 3 men, Scott, Brett, and Connor, ventured out, moving with the apprehension of soldiers entering a war zone. On the outdoor camera feed, I saw Brett's foot land squarely in a fresh, steaming pile of horse manure. Scout, our mare, was nothing if not prolific. Connor, trying to wrestle open the feed bin, shrieked, recoiling as 3 mice scattered like brown projectiles. They'd moved in after I'd forgotten to secure the feed properly a few days prior. But the true masterpiece of the morning unfolded when Derek, or was it David, approached the chicken coop, feed bucket in hand. Diablo, our rooster, a feathered missile of pure territorial fury, launched himself at the unsuspecting boy. The bucket flew, scattering feed like confetti. Instant chaos. Chickens swarmed in a feathery tide. Pigs charged from the patio, grunting with predatory glee. The horses, sensing drama, trotted over to investigate. Scott, still operating on boardroom belligerence, barked commands, a futile attempt to impose corporate order on the farm's wild symphony. Thunder, our lead gelding, seemed particularly offended by Scott's tone, delivering a swift, decisive nudge that sent him flailing into the water trough. Inside, the women fared little better. The kitchen sink, thanks to Tom's midnight tinkering, had developed a mysterious, persistent leak. The stove, with its newly adjusted gas flow, idled into warmth at a glacial pace. Every drawer they opened offered a curated surprise. Mousetraps, rubber snakes strategically placed to deter their real counterparts, or my extensive collection of veterinary supplies, including syringes disturbingly large enough for horse vaccinations. "There's something wrong with the eggs," Ashley shrieked, holding up a shimmering green orb as if it were toxic. "They're defective." Ruth, beside me, had to pause the video feed as I dissolved into laughter. My Americana chickens laid the most exquisite blue and green eggs, a natural marvel, yet to city dwellers, a sign of some farm-fresh calamity. By 7 a.m., they had managed to produce what could charitably be called breakfast: burnt instant oatmeal, the defective green eggs Sophia refused to touch, and instant decaf that tasted like distilled disappointment. The milk was powdered, the fresh gallon in the fridge having inexplicably gone sour. A simple adjustment of the refrigerator's thermostat before I left had ensured that. "I need a shower," Sabrina announced, a plea for salvation. A long, hot shower. "Oh, sweet summer child." I barely bit back the words. The guest bathroom shower offered two brutal extremes: Arctic blast or the surface of Mercury. The water pressure, too, was a marvel of engineered dysfunction, either stripping paint from the walls or a sorrowful dribble with no temperate middle ground. I'd also swapped out the luxurious towels for abrasive camping ones, which absorbed about as much water as waxed paper. Sabrina's initial shriek as the cold hit her was audible even in my remote viewing perch. Then, as the scalding water kicked in, the shriek ascended an octave, a symphony of torment. Madison, braver, tried the other guest bathroom, only to discover the drain was slow. Tom, in his meticulous design for discomfort, had woven horsehair into the pipes, ensuring a rapid flood. Meanwhile, Scott, clutching his phone like a lifeline, was desperately trying to get online to handle urgent business matters. He'd found the router, plugged it in. Yet, despite his best efforts, the internet remained stubbornly inert. What he couldn't see was the 47-character string of random symbols that now constituted the Wi-Fi password, the paper bearing it carefully hidden within the barn, buried deep in the heart of the hay bales in the loft. "Maybe there's Wi-Fi in town?" Connor ventured, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "I am not driving 40 minutes for internet," Scott snapped, the stress tightening its grip. Good. Just then they stumbled upon the next phase of my plan, the task board in the mudroom. I'd crafted it myself, titled Daily Ranch Responsibilities, in a meticulous recreation of Adam's handwriting. Laminated, official, it looked as if it had always been there, an immutable law of the land. Muck stalls, 8 a.m., wear protection. Collect eggs, 8:30 a.m., check fence lines, 9 a.m., move irrigation pipes, 10 a.m., feed chickens again, 11 a.m., special diet. Clean pool filters, noon, clean the pool. Brett, bless his naive heart, actually perked up. Maybe it's not as bad as it looked yesterday. Sweet, innocent Brett. In the unforgiving light of day, the pool was worse. The algae had bloomed overnight into a verdant, suffocating carpet. The bullfrogs, clearly feeling festive, had invited every amphibious cousin for miles. And something that might have been a small alligator, though likely just an oversized stick, floated ominously in the deep end. The stench could have peeled paint. "We are not doing this," Patricia declared, her voice sharp with disgust. "This is not what we came here for." "Then why did you come, Patricia?" I murmured to the screen, though she couldn't hear me. "For the free vacation? For Instagram photos? To case my property, perhaps? To see what your daughter married into?" Ruth beside me topped up her champagne. We'd long since abandoned coffee for something stronger as we watched the drama unfold. Sabrina, predictably, wanted to flee immediately. Scott, caught between pride and pragmatism, insisted they couldn't simply abandon the animals. The cousins from Miami were already packing. Brett, meanwhile, was Googling, "Can you get diseases from horse manure?" on what little cell signal he could coax by standing on one scabby leg near the chicken coop. Then came the moment I'd choreographed for. Scott, frustrated and desperate, retreated to my bedroom, hoping to find anything a different Wi-Fi password, contact information for Tom and Miguel, anything. On my dresser, addressed to him in my own handwriting, he found the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "Scott, by the time you read this, you'll have experienced about 1% of what running a ranch actually entails. Your father did this every day for the last 2 years of his life, even during chemo, because he loved it. This wasn't just my dream, it was ours. If you can't respect that, if you can't respect me, then you don't belong here. The horses know it, the chickens know it, even the bullfrogs in the pool know it. Do you?" Beneath the note was a photograph, taken a month before Adam died. He was on Thunder, his beat-up cowboy hat tilted back, grinning like he'd won the lottery. In the background, barely visible, I was there too, mucking out stalls in rubber boots and his old flannel shirt, doubled over with laughter at something he'd just said. We'd been so utterly, completely happy here. Through the camera, I watched my son sink onto the edge of the bed, the letter clutched in his hand. His face cycled through a kaleidoscope of emotions I hadn't witnessed since Adam's funeral. Shame, recognition, maybe even a nascent understanding. But then, Sabrina's voice, sharp and high-pitched, sliced through the quiet. "Scott, there's something wrong with the toilet. It won't stop making noise." The spell shattered. He folded the letter, tucked it into his pocket, and went to deal with the mysteriously running toilet. A simple flapper adjustment, 5 seconds if you knew what you were doing, hours if you didn't. We ordered lunch at the Four Seasons. I savoured my salmon. Ruth demolished the prime rib. My phone buzzed incessantly. 17 missed calls from Scott, 23 from Sabrina, and 1 text from Patricia that simply read, "This is elder abuse. Elder abuse." I laughed so hard the waiter had to check on us. The sun was setting on their first full day at the ranch. Through the cameras, I watched them gather in the living room, a picture of utter exhaustion, caked in dirt, profoundly defeated. They'd managed to feed the animals badly, collected some eggs, losing 3 to Diablo's relentless fury, and Brett, in a valiant effort to skim the algae, had fallen into the pool himself. For dinner, they gnawed on canned beans and stale crackers. No one dared face the 40-minute drive to town, and the horses, seizing their moment of unsupervised freedom, had broken into the kitchen again while they were outside, devouring everything else edible. "One more day," I told Ruth, raising my glass. "One more day, and they'll break completely." "You're evil," she said, an admiring glint in her eyes. "Absolutely evil." "No," I corrected her. Adam's face, his dreams, the life we'd built flashing through my mind, the life Scott wanted to steal. "I'm just a rancher protecting her land." Saturday morning arrived with what I can only describe as biblical precision. At precisely 3:47 a.m., the Petersons' prize-winning pigs discovered that the hole in the fence so, fortuitously widened by Tom's late-night handiwork before he left for his family visit, had transformed into a gaping invitation. All 6 pigs, led by a massive sow named Bertha, stormed onto my property. Their ultimate treasure? Sabrina's Mercedes-Benz, windows cracked invitingly for ventilation. The car alarm, erupting at 4 a.m., was spectacular. I watched, mesmerized, as Scott stumbled outside in his underwear, clad in ridiculous city slippers, trying to herd 3 pigs out of the back seat. Bertha, meanwhile, had made herself quite at home in the driver's seat, enthusiastically devouring what appeared to be Sabrina's $500 calfskin purse. "This can't be happening," he chanted, a desperate mantra against the unfolding chaos. But oh, it absolutely was. The Rooster recording joined the symphony at 4:30, right on schedule, this time augmented with a liberal dose of peacock screams. The resulting caterwaul was so unholy that Connor actually fell out of bed, taking a scratchy blanket and a bedside lamp down with him. By the time everyone, Patricia having abandoned her white linen for what looked like her husband's 1987 golf clothes unearthed from an attic, Madison artfully draped in a horse blanket, and Derek or David, shirtless despite the morning chill having given up entirely, congregated in the kitchen at 5 a.m. They looked like survivors of some apocalyptic event. "We're leaving," Sabrina announced, her voice flat, devoid of negotiation. "Today, now." "The car," Scott began. "I don't care about the car. Call a rental company." That's when they discovered the nearest car rental was 2 hours away at the airport, booked solid thanks to a rodeo. And the local taxi service? One car and Bud Thompson, its sole driver, was visiting his daughter in Seattle. The suggestion hung in the air, fragile as a spider web, then snapped under the collective glare. "We could call an Uber," Ashley offered, a hopeful tremor in her voice. The look she received could have curdled fresh milk. An Uber, 43 minutes from town in rural Montana, with no cell service to even summon such a luxury. A beat later, a triumphant shout cut through the tension. "I found coffee!" Brett emerged from the pantry clutching the illicit can I'd so carefully hidden. It was the first genuine smile I'd caught on any of their faces, a momentary truce in the silent war of attrition. They focused on the promise of caffeine, blind to the dust motes dancing in the beam of light that illuminated 10-year-old canned goods, unconcerned with why Brett had been rummaging there to begin with. Small mercies indeed in desperate times. As the ancient percolator gurgled to life, a new sound joined the morning chorus, louder, more audacious than anything that had come before. Thunder. Not the storm, but the ranch horse. He hadn't busted through the barn door, no. He'd worked the latch with his teeth. Now he was leading Bella and Scout in what could only be described as a triumphant procession around the house, hooves thundering a rhythm against the porch boards. "How are they so smart?" Maria wailed, pressing her face against the window. I, in my comfortable chair across town, raised a mimosa to my laptop screen. "They're ranch horses," I murmured, watching the scene unfold. "They learn from the best." Then, nature itself joined the rebellion. The septic system, which I deliberately had serviced before my strategic departure, yet told Scott was acting up, rebelled with dramatic timing. It wasn't a full collapse, just enough of a backup to render the downstairs bathroom an olfactory hazard, driving everyone onto the porch. There, framed against the rising sun, stood Diablo, the rooster, perched majestically on the porch swing. He had declared the porch his new domain, defending it with the fervour of a medieval knight. Connor, bless his logical heart, tried reasoning with him. "You can't reason with a rooster," I whispered to the screen as Diablo launched himself, wings spread, spurs glinting. Connor's retreat set a new land speed record. "We need help," Scott finally conceded, voice tight, fumbling for his phone to call me again. This time I answered on the first ring, my voice bright as Christmas morning. "Hi, honey. How's the ranch?" His relief was palpable. "Mom, we need you to come back. Everything is falling apart." I made soothing, concerned noises, playing my part for Ruth, who was filming my Oscar-worthy performance for posterity. He rattled off the litany of disasters, his voice growing frantic. "Well," I said when he finally paused for breath, "Tom and Miguel should be back Monday. They'll know what to do. In the meantime, there's a manual in the barn for all the equipment and systems. Your father wrote it all down." This was true. Adam, my late husband, had meticulously documented every detail of the ranch in a 300-page laminated tome. It was currently buried under 500 bales of hay in the loft. Good luck finding it. Monday? Mum? We can't. Oh, my doctor's calling. The specialist, you know, for my arthritis. Got to go. I hung up, then switched off my phone. Through the cameras, I watched Scott hurl his phone against the porch rail. It bounced, landing with a sickening thud in a fresh pile of pig droppings. The day unravelled like a symphony of escalating chaos. Laundry, with its eco-friendly detergent requiring precise measurements and consistent hot water, which the guest wing mysteriously lacked, turned Madison's designer white dress a patchy grey and dissolved Ashley's silk blouse entirely. A desperate trip to town for supplies was aborted when Scott's BMW revealed a flat tyre, a single roofing nail conveniently placed near his parking spot. Sabrina's Mercedes was still occupied by Bertha, the pig, who had claimed it as her new residence. The rental SUVs, a final hope, were somehow locked with the keys inside, a mystery solvable had anyone noticed the helpful crow who'd developed a penchant for shiny objects. By noon, the temperature in the guest bedrooms, with their cleverly sealed attic vents, had climbed to a stifling 79 degrees. Opening windows only invited the swarms of flies, drawn by the burgeoning agricultural aroma. "There's food in the freezer," Connor announced, pulling out what he assumed was a roast. He didn't know it was venison from last year's hunt, simply labelled meat, in Adam's laconic hand. Defrosted in the microwave, it transformed into rubber, its scent alone a weapon. Lunch reverted to crackers and the universally rejected green eggs. Outside, the animals had organised into what looked suspiciously like a protest. The horses stood at the kitchen window staring with judgmental eyes. Chickens had discovered the porch roof, now pecking insistently at upstairs bedroom windows. Pigs had abandoned the Mercedes for the BMW, one ambitious piglet managing to wiggle into the engine compartment. "This is insane," Patricia fanned herself with a paper plate, her voice a reedy whisper. Absolutely insane. Then came the rain. Montana summer storms are not gentle. This one arrived at 2 p.m., a sudden violent downpour, thunderclaps shaking the very foundations. Rain came sideways, finding every unsealed gap in the windows I'd so conveniently left. Within minutes, the guest bedrooms were soaked, but the true masterpiece of my design revealed itself when they tried to close the windows. The old wooden frames, which I'd meant to fix but forgot to mention, had swollen. They were stuck irrevocably open. Brett and Connor, in their futile attempts to force them, succeeded only in shattering one completely, leaving a gaping wound for the rain to exploit with enthusiastic abandon. "We need towels!" Sabrina shrieked. "Oh, honey, those camping towels aren't going to change anything." They resorted to scratchy blankets, their own clothes, anything absorbent, trying to stem the watery onslaught. Meanwhile, the mudroom roof, with its tiny leak, I'd noticed, but hadn't mentioned, had transformed into a roaring waterfall, sending my carefully laminated task board floating by like a miniature raft of forgotten responsibilities. The storm passed in an hour, leaving behind a world smelling of damp wool and exhaustion. The power flickered, then died. My backup generator, designed to kick in automatically, remained stubbornly silent, out of propane. Tom had emptied it on my instructions. The manual start generator in the barn required a 16-page instruction booklet in Japanese. I'd swapped the manuals months ago, a private joke I'd simply forgotten to undo. Serendipity. As darkness fell, they huddled in the living room, illuminated by the trick birthday candles I'd left. Candles that stubbornly relit each time they were blown out. Watching them wrestle with the mischievous flames was better than any cable TV. "We could cook on the grill," Scott ventured, a desperate bid for normalcy. The gas grill was empty. The charcoal grill demanded actual knowledge of charcoal, a skill tragically absent. Their efforts resulted in what could charitably be called blackened everything. Even the vegetables were simultaneously burnt and raw. Dinner was cold canned beans, eaten in the flickering light of the recalcitrant candles, while rain dripped through various ceiling spots, and Diablo, the rooster, patrolled the porch like a feathered sentry. "I want to go home," Sophia whispered, her voice raw. It was the first honest statement any of them had made. "This is Scott's home now." Patricia's voice cut through the air, sharp as a razor. "His inheritance, right, Scott? This is what you wanted." Through the infrared camera, battery-powered of course, I saw my son's face. He looked broken. "Good." "I just thought," he started. "You thought you'd take over Mom's retirement paradise," Sabrina finished, her voice laced with bitterness. "Turn it into our vacation home, maybe rent it out when we weren't here." "You talked about it for months," Madison added, "how much money the property was worth, how you could subdivide it." "Subdivide it? My 80 acres, our dream." Ruth squeezed my hand as we watched. "You okay?" "I'm perfect," I said, and for the first time in a while, I meant it. At 9 p.m. a kind of magic bloomed. The clouds cleared, revealing the stunning Montana night sky, vast and unpolluted by city lights. Thousands of stars, the Milky Way a shimmering river of light across the obsidian canvas. Through the cameras, I watched them step onto the porch. Diablo had finally retreated to his coop. For a moment, they were silent, captivated by a spectacle most of them had never witnessed. Connor pointed out Mars. Ashley gasped at her first shooting star. Even Patricia seemed subdued, momentarily humbled by the majesty. "It's beautiful," Sabrina admitted quietly. "Dad loved this," Scott said, his voice barely a whisper. "He used to email me photos of the night sky here. I always deleted them without looking." The confession hung in the air, another star in the vast dark. "He built this place for Mom," he continued. "Every fence post, every garden bed. Even when he was sick, he was out here working. And I called it a waste of money." "You said worse than that," Patricia reminded him, because of course she did. The fragile moment shattered. They retreated inside to their damp, dim rooms. Through night vision cameras, I watched them toss and turn on the uncomfortable beds. Too hot, then too cold. Scratchy blankets offering little comfort. At midnight, the coyotes began to howl, not close enough to be dangerous but audible through the broken window. The owls joined in. Then Bertha, still in the Mercedes, discovered the horn. Sunday. One more day. Tomorrow they would finally break, and I would return to reclaim my kingdom. But tonight, just for a moment, under those breathtaking stars, Scott had remembered his father. It was more than I'd expected, perhaps more than he deserved. "Ready for the grand finale?" Ruth asked, her phone displaying the weather forecast. I looked at Sunday's prediction. 102 degrees, no cloud cover, a wind advisory. "Oh yes," I said, raising my champagne glass to the screen where my son sat in the dark, finally understanding what he tried to take. "Let's finish this properly." The best part, my secret weapon, still undeployed. Tomorrow they would meet the llamas. Sunday dawned with what meteorologists would later term an unprecedented temperature spike. By 6 a.m., it was already 85 degrees. By 7 a.m., the clock on the microwave, a relic even when it worked, stubbornly held 8 o'clock as the exhausted group stumbled into the kitchen. Outside, the rooster, seemingly invigorated by their misery, crowed its 10th serenade. The air inside pushed 90 degrees. "Why is it so hot?" Ashley whimpered, fanning herself with a flimsy paper towel, her mascara already smudged past her eyelids. "Because, darling," I thought from my perch at the Four Seasons, where Ruth and I savoured perfectly chilled eggs Benedict. I turned off the central air before I left. Only the inadequate window units in the guest rooms remained, and they were useless without power. The generator's manual override, tucked behind 700 pounds of lumber Tom had, on my instructions, stacked in Adam's workshop for winter projects. Through the live feed on my laptop, I watched them make the next grim discovery. The refrigerator, silent for over 12 hours, had transformed into a putrid sarcophagus. When Connor bravely wrenched open the door, a stench thick and green billowed out, sending everyone gagging to the porch. There, a new welcoming committee awaited. The llamas. Not mine, of course. They belong to the Johnsons, 2 properties over. But llamas, much like teenagers, possess a wanderlust easily ignited by a compromised fence, and someone, definitely not Tom on my direct instructions, might have created a very convenient, very specific path from the Johnsons' south pasture directly to my front yard. 3 of them: Napoleon, the Spitter, Julius, the Screamer, and Cleopatra, who had a palpable issue with personal space. Brett, poor innocent Brett, was the first to lock eyes with Napoleon. A fatal mistake. Napoleon's ears flattened, his neck arched in a graceful predatory curve, and with the precision of a seasoned marksman, he launched a projectile stream of green, half-digested grass directly into Brett's face. Brett's shriek of pure horror harmonized beautifully with Julius's answering bellow, a sound somewhere between a rusty gate hinge and a demon's dying laugh. Cleopatra, not to be outdone, decided Madison's glossy hair bore a striking resemblance to hay and made a determined attempt to sample it. "What are these things?" Sabrina shrieked, sidestepping Julius's uncomfortably intimate sniff of her armpit. "Guard llamas," I murmured to my laptop screen, a small smile touching my lips. "Very effective ones." Llamas, you see, are intensely curious creatures, and once you've piqued their interest, they become shadows, appearing everywhere. The group retreated, stumbling back into the house, but the llamas simply stationed themselves at the windows, their enormous dark eyes fixed inward, occasionally emitting a guttural scream of exclusion. Inside, the temperature continued its relentless climb, powerless, air conditioner-less, and with the morning sun magnifying through every pane, the house was quickly becoming an oven. They flung open every window, only to invite a new torment: flies, which had multiplied exponentially in the warm, feculent air surrounding the uncleaned animal droppings. "We need ice," Scott declared, his last clean shirt already plastered to his back with sweat. The ice maker naturally required electricity. The backup ice in the barn freezer had long since liquefied. The nearest store was a 43-minute drive, and the car situation hadn't improved. The BMW still nursed a flat. The Mercedes had become Bertha's permanent maternity ward. She'd given birth to 5 squealing piglets overnight, all nursing contentedly in the back seat. And the rental cars, despite repeated attempts, remained mysteriously, infuriatingly locked. Then a flicker of hope. Connor, ever the optimist, discovered the well. "There's a hand pump," he announced triumphantly. "We can at least get cold water." What Connor and the others didn't know was that the well pump hadn't been maintained in years. It worked, technically, but the water emerged rust-coloured, thick with sediment, and reeking of sulphur. They tried it anyway. Maria promptly threw up. Even the stoic llamas recoiled from the smell. By noon, the temperature hit 102 degrees. The metal roof of the house clicked and popped like percussion, expanding under the brutal sun. The horses had wisely found the only shade directly under the kitchen window, their presence adding a rich, manure-laden aromatherapy to the already dense air. The chickens, defeated, lay panting in dust bowls they'd hollowed out, beaks agape. "I'm calling 911, Patricia announced, her phone clutched in a sweaty hand. "And telling them—" "What?" Scott snapped, his patience finally dissolving. "That it's hot, and there are llamas." At that precise moment, Diablo, heat-stressed, furious, and quite possibly insane, discovered he could fly high enough to enter through the broken bedroom window. The ensuing sounds from upstairs were a chaotic symphony of rooster rage and human hysteria. Derek David came rocketing down the stairs, fresh scratches blooming on his arms, Diablo's emerald tail feathers clutched like a trophy. "It attacked me! The chicken attacked me! In my sleep." Technically, no one had been sleeping, but the drama was, at least, appreciated. The afternoon brought the wind. Montana wind doesn't play games. It arrives at 40 miles per hour and carries half the topsoil with it. The broken window transformed into a dust-spewing portal, admitting hay, grit, and what could only be described as farm confetti. Within minutes, everything was coated in a fine, gritty layer of agricultural history. "We're leaving," Sabrina declared for what felt like the 100th time. "We'll walk to town if we have to." "It's 105 degrees, Scott rasped, his eyes red-rimmed. "It's over 40 miles. We'll die. We're dying here." Then they heard the trucks. 3 pickup trucks, rumbling down the drive, music blaring, horns blaring. The cavalry, the rescue. No. It was the Hendersons from the next ranch over, arriving for the Sunday social I'd conveniently forgotten to mention I'd signed up to host weeks ago. 15 people poured out of the vehicles, bearing casserole dishes, coolers teeming with beer, and, inexplicably, a karaoke machine. Big Jim Henderson, a man easily pushing 300 pounds, enveloped Scott in a crushing bear hug. "You must be Gail's boy. She told us all about you, said you were dying to experience real ranch life." What?" Scott stammered, bewildered. "Don't you worry. We brought everything, even got the mechanical bull in the truck. Your mama said you wanted to learn to ride." Ruth and I nearly choked on our mimosas, watching Scott's face contort as the Hendersons unloaded an actual mechanical bull and began setting it up in the front yard. The llamas, ever present, were fascinated. Napoleon immediately spat on it. The Hendersons, bless their oblivious hearts, didn't seem to notice the power outage. They had generators in their trucks. They didn't care about the heat. They were ranchers. They didn't even care about the llamas, though Big Jim's wife Dolly did ask, squinting, "These new—" Don't remember Gail mentioning llamas. What followed was 3 hours of forced socialization. The Hendersons were genuinely lovely people, assuming Scott's family shared their boundless enthusiasm for ranch life. They wanted to hear all about their plans for the property, their favorite cattle breeds, their philosophies on rotational grazing. Madison, who looked like she might burst, tried to explain she was from Miami. Big Jim's son, Little Jim, who was in fact considerably larger than Big Jim, took this as an invitation to recount every single person he'd ever met from Florida. A story that consumed 45 minutes and included grainy photographs. Brett was hoisted onto the mechanical bull. He lasted 1.3 seconds before being launched into a pile of hay the llamas had unfortunately been using as a communal bathroom. The Hendersons cheered as if he'd won Olympic gold. Sabrina retreated to the bathroom intent on a private cry, but Dolly, sensing a feminine moment, followed, assuming she needed girl talk about ranch wife life. Through the discreet bathroom camera, I heard Dolly offering detailed advice on birthing cattle, treating foot rot, and the most effective methods for castrating bulls. Karaoke began at 4 p.m. sharp. Big Jim insisted everyone participate. Connor's tortured rendition of Friends in Low Places, with Napoleon's screaming accompaniment, was particularly memorable. Patricia, forced to sing Stand By Your Man, looked like she was passing kidney stones. But the moment that truly broke Scott came when little Jim, wiping sweat from his brow, asked, "So when's your mom coming back? She promised to show me her new canning setup." "She's in Denver," Scott said weakly. "Medical stuff." "Medical stuff?" Big Jim boomed, his voice echoing across the dusty yard. "That woman's healthier than my prize bull. Saw her last week throwing hay bales like they were pillows. What kind of medical stuff?" Scott couldn't answer, because that's when Bertha, fiercely protective of her newborn piglets, decided the mechanical bull was a clear and present danger. A 400-pound sow charging a mechanical bull while 15 ranchers scrambled for safety and 3 llamas shrieked encouragement is something nature documentaries should frankly cover. The Hendersons finally departed at sunset, but not before extracting solemn promises to make this a weekly Sunday tradition and leaving behind the mechanical bull. "You'll need practice," Big Jim had boomed, clapping Scott on the shoulder. The family sat amidst the wreckage of the yard as darkness fell. No power, no edible food, covered in dust, sweat, and various animal fluids. The temperature had mercifully dropped to a mere 95 degrees. "I want Mum," Scott said quietly, his voice small, childlike. Even Sabrina looked at him with something bordering on sympathy. "I want my mom," he repeated, a tremor in his voice. "I need to apologize." Through the camera, I watched him pull out the letter I'd left, now crumpled and stained. He read it again, this time aloud. When he reached the part about Adam doing this during chemo, his voice broke, tears finally blurring his vision. "We should leave," Patricia said, but for once her voice lacked its usual venom. "With what car?" Scott laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "We are stuck, just like Mom wanted us to be." "Maybe," Connor said carefully, his gaze sweeping over the chaos. "She wanted you to understand something." "Understand what? That ranch life is hell?" "That it's work," Connor corrected, his voice firm. "Hard work, every day, and she does it alone now." The silence that followed was profound. Even the llamas had quieted, their dark silhouettes stark against the darkening sky. "I told her she should sell," Scott admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "The day after Dad's funeral, at the reception, I pulled her aside and said she was too old to handle this place alone, said Dad was selfish for wanting to die here." Even Patricia winced visibly at that. "I had a buyer lined up, a development company. They would have paid 3 times what she paid for it." "You were trying to sell your mother's home?" Ashley gasped, genuinely shocked. "I thought I was helping. She's 67 alone, doing all this." He gestured vaguely at the debris-strewn yard. "I thought I was being practical." "You thought you were getting rich," Sabrina corrected, her voice flat. The truth of it hung in the air, as palpable as the dust that still swirled in the dying wind. That's when I decided it was time. I called Tom. He hadn't actually left town, of course. "Phase 3, I said simply. "With pleasure, Mrs. M," he replied. 30 minutes later, as the family sat in their dusty, defeated silence, headlights appeared on the drive. Tom's truck, bristling with the familiar silhouettes of 3 horses in its trailer, crunched to a halt. "Evening, folks," he drawled, tipping his hat. "Got a call from Mrs. Morrison. Said you might need some help getting these horses back where they belong." A beat of stunned silence, then a slow, dawning horror as they recognized Scout, Bella, and Thunder, the very horses that had waged war on their weekend. "Whose horses," Scott rasped, "are in the house?" Tom's grin widened. "Oh, those would be the Petersons' rescue horses. They're filming a documentary about animal intelligence. Mrs. Morrison volunteered her place for the weekend. Didn't she mention it? They're trained to open doors, work latches, even use human toilets if needed. Though I see they didn't quite master that last one." The blood drained from Scott's face, a tableau of pure, unadulterated shock that to Tom was worth far more than any presidential suite. "The llamas are ours, though," Tom continued cheerfully, as if delivering a weather report. "Well, the Johnsons. They'll want them back eventually. Maybe they're kind of a pain, honestly." As if on cue, Napoleon, the lead llama, unleashed one final pearlescent glob of spit, striking the mechanical bull with unnerving precision. "Mrs. Morrison will be back tomorrow morning," Tom added, already leading the rescued horses toward the trailer. "Said to tell you she hopes you enjoyed your authentic ranch experience. Oh, and the power's controlled by an app on her phone. She'll turn it back on when she gets home." He drove off into the encroaching twilight, leaving them shrouded in a darkness both literal and metaphorical. Their only companions were the mechanical bull, the indifferent llamas, and the shattered fragments of their assumptions. I turned to Ruth, who, ever the meticulous chronicler, was recording every excruciating detail. "One more sunrise," I murmured. "One more rooster call, then I go home." I glanced at the screen of her phone at my son, still clutching my letter, surrounded by the wreckage of his entitlement. Think they learned anything? I asked quietly. Ruth held my gaze. We're about to find out. Monday morning dawned with the precision of divine comedy. At precisely 3 a.m., the mechanical bull, an arm which Big Jim had conveniently forgotten to mention possessed a timer function, exploded to life. Flashing lights strobed and a country music anthem, "Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys," blared at maximum volume. Through the infrared cameras, I watched Scott bolt upright from his makeshift bed on the living room floor. The guest rooms had by now become utterly uninhabitable, reeking of dust and a bouquet of mystery odours. He stumbled outside in his underwear, only to freeze. There, astride the bucking beast, was Napoleon, the llama. I am not exaggerating. The llama had not only figured out how to climb on, but was now seated with the regal bearing of a furry emperor, as the machine gently rocked. Julius and Cleopatra, the other llamas, stood nearby, emitting piercing shrieks of approval. "This isn't real," Scott mumbled to the pre-dawn stillness, his voice thin with disbelief. "This can't be real." Oh, but it was. By the time he located the power cord, it had become inextricably wrapped around Napoleon, who showed no inclination to dismount. The rest of the family had gathered on the porch, a tableau of the damned, hair matted, clothes filthy, eyes hollowed by sleep deprivation. "Is that a llama?" "Riding the bull?" Sabrina whispered, her voice barely a thread. Patricia, who appeared to have aged a decade in 3 days, responded with a flat, world-weary tone. "Nothing surprises me anymore." The rooster alarm blared at 4:30 a.m. This time no one even flinched. They were broken. Completely, utterly broken. As the sun crept over the horizon, it illuminated the full, unvarnished devastation of their weekend. Mercedes ravaged by the pig, the pool a swamp of mud, the house looking as if a tornado had briefly taken up residence. They sat on the porch steps in a defeated silence. Even Diablo, the previously aggressive rooster, seemed to sense their despair, walking by without a single feather ruffled in attack. That was my cue. I had timed my entrance to perfection. My pristine Range Rover pulled up just as the first rays of morning sunlight kissed the mountains. Ruth, a magician with cosmetics, had worked her magic back at the hotel. I wore my best jeans, Adam's favourite flannel shirt, and the turquoise jewellery he'd given me for our last anniversary. I looked exactly what I was, a woman in complete, unyielding control of her domain. The family watched me emerge from the car as if I were a ghost, or perhaps an avenging angel. "Good morning," I called cheerfully, grabbing my weekend bag. "How was your authentic ranch experience?" No one answered. They simply stared. I walked past the mechanical bull. Napoleon had finally dismounted and was now systematically devouring my prize roses, stepped over various droppings, and entered my home. Through the doorway they could hear me humming as I started the coffee maker, the good one I'd hidden in the attic. "Mom," Scott finally managed, trailing me inside. "Yes, dear?" You were in Denver. The Four Seasons has an excellent spa. Did you know they have a treatment where they wrap you in Swiss chocolate? Very relaxing." I pulled out my phone. With 3 taps, the power surged back. The air conditioning hummed to life. The refrigerator began its familiar purr. "You could control it the whole time," he said, not a question. "I can control quite a lot of things, Scott. This is my home." The others had crept inside, now watching our interaction, as if it were a live performance, their eyes wide and unblinking. "The horses weren't mine, then?" Scott asked, a flicker of hope in his voice. "No. Scout, Bella, and Thunder are much better behaved. They're in the barn where they belong. The llamas will be going home soon, though Napoleon seems to have developed a fondness for that bull." "You planned everything." I turned to face him fully, channeling every ounce of frustration, disappointment, and hurt that had accumulated over the past 2 years. "No, Scott. You planned everything. You planned to intimidate me into leaving. You planned to take over my home. You planned to turn our dream, your father's and mine, into some Airbnb investment. You even researched my finances and consulted with that development company about subdividing the property. Sabrina gasped. That last detail was clearly new to her. How did you... Mr. Davidson from the development company is married to my friend Ruth's sister. Small world, isn't it? He was very interested to learn that you were negotiating the sale of property you don't own. I was trying to help. No. My voice, if it could, would have frozen hell itself. You were trying to help yourself to your inheritance, as you called it. Tell me, Scott, what did you inherit from your father? He was silent. I'll tell you what he left you. He left you a mother who loves you despite your greed. He left you memories you ignored. He left you values you rejected. And he left you the opportunity to be a better man than you've chosen to be. Oi. I pulled a document from my bag. This is the deed to the ranch. As you can see, it's been transferred to a living trust. You are not a beneficiary. The ranch will be maintained as a working farm and animal sanctuary in perpetuity. When I die, it will be managed by the Henderson family, who actually understand what it means to love the land. Patricia made a strangled sound. Scott went pale, as if all the blood had drained from his face at once. You cut him out, Sabrina whispered. I gave him exactly what he gave me, I stated, my voice echoing in the now silent room. No respect, no consideration, and no claim to what I have built. I turned to address the entire group, their postures a mixture of defiance and rapidly crumbling terror. You came here uninvited, treating my home like a hotel and me like the help. You posted on social media about inheriting a ranch before I was even dead. You complained about every aspect of the life your father and I chose, all while planning to profit from our labor. That's not, Scott started. I have recordings, Scott. Every phone call where you discussed my decline, every conversation with Sabrina about how to handle me. The group text where you all mocked the ranch and called me a stubborn old woman playing farmer. I pulled out my tablet, showing them screenshots of their own words, damning and cruel. But here's what you don't have recordings of, I continued, my voice softening just enough to cut deeper. Your father, 2 weeks before he died, sitting on that porch making me promise not to let you destroy this place. He knew what you'd become. It broke his heart, but he knew. Scott sank into a chair, the weight of it all, the shame, the recognition, the utter loss. Finally hitting him. I do love you, Scott, I said, my voice now genuinely gentle. I always will, but love doesn't mean accepting disrespect. It doesn't mean sacrificing my dreams for your greed. And it certainly doesn't mean letting you turn our sanctuary into a commodity. What are we supposed to do now? Patricia asked, apparently still missing the point entirely. You're supposed to leave. Tom will be here soon with a tow truck for your cars. The rental company has been notified that you'll be returning the vehicles today. And yes, I found the keys. The crows had hidden them in the barn rafters. Fascinating creatures, crows. But, Sabrina began, but nothing. This is my home. You are no longer welcome here. The silence was deafening, thick with resentment and shock. Finally, Connor, of all people, spoke. We owe you an apology, Mrs. Morrison. A real one. We're sorry, Ashley added quietly. This place it's actually beautiful. We just couldn't see it. I nodded, an acknowledgement, but said nothing more. Apologies were just words. Adam always told me to watch what people did, not what they said. It took them 3 agonizing hours to pack and clean up the worst of the damage. I supervised from the porch, sipping my coffee, occasionally calling out helpful suggestions. The pig after birth needs a special cleaner. It's under the sink. Llama spit is acidic. Better scrub harder. That's not mud in the pool filter. Tom arrived with his tow truck and a crew. The cars were retrieved, given a minimal cleaning, and made drivable. The llamas were loaded into a trailer, though Napoleon made his feelings known by spitting on Scott one last time for good measure. As they prepared to leave, Scott approached me, his shoulders slumped. Mom, I know, I interrupted softly. You're sorry. You'll do better. You want another chance, right? He nodded miserably. Earn it, I said simply. Not with words. Not with grand gestures. With time. With genuine change. Your father spent 2 years building this place with his bare hands while fighting cancer. You can't even spend a weekend here without complaining. When you can match his commitment to something beyond yourself, call me. How will I know when that is? He asked, his eyes searching mine. You'll know. He hugged me then, awkwardly, briefly. It was a start. The first real emotions splintered across his face all weekend. They retreated in a convoy of dented fenders and bruised pride. Sabrina didn't glance back, already lost in her phone, no doubt detailing her escape to the bridge club. The Miami cousins, pale and shaken, now possessed a story no one would ever believe. Only Scott, in that fleeting rearview mirror moment, offered a look I couldn't quite decipher. Understanding, perhaps, or merely the ghost of regret, time, as always, would expose the truth. Hell of a weekend, Mrs. Morrison, Tom chuckled, his grin wide as we unlatched the pasture gate, releasing my horses. Scout immediately found his cherished dust patch, rolling with blissful abandon. Bella trotted straight for the apple tree while Thunder, majestic and still, surveyed his domain from the fence line. Worth every penny of that hotel and your overtime pay. Mr. Morrison would have loved it. He would have, I agreed, a smile tugging at my lips, though he probably would have used actual skunks. We stood there, bathed in the late afternoon sun, the ranch's familiar controlled chaos, a balm to the recent storm. That evening the world softened. From my porch swing, a glass of Adam's favourite whiskey in hand, I watched the mountains bleed from purple to gold as the sun dipped below the horizon. The ranch settled into its natural symphony, the contented nicker of horses, the rustle of chickens finding their roosts, the low, distant murmur of cattle. My phone vibrated, a text from Scott. The mechanical bull is still in your yard. I tapped a reply. Consider it a monument to authenticity. Then I switched off my phone, raised my glass to Adam's memory, and savoured the profound silence of a dream defended, a home reclaimed. Tomorrow the roosters would crow at 4:30 a.m., their vibrant call echoing across the fields. But this time, I would be the only one to hear them. And that, I knew, was exactly as it should be. 3 weeks later, the ranch hummed with its old, blessed rhythm. Coffee brewed with the sunrise. Afternoons were spent tending the garden Adam and I had planted years ago. Evenings belonged to my horses. The mechanical bull remained a bizarre metal sentinel in the front yard, now garlanded with black-eyed Susans I'd planted around its base. My neighbours thought I'd lost my mind. I'd never felt more sane. Then the letter arrived. Not a text, not an email, but a tangible, handwritten envelope. Scott's careful script, the same penmanship I'd taught him at 7, perched at our Chicago kitchen table, his tongue poking out in intense concentration. Dear Mom, I've been volunteering at the Veterans Ranch in Colorado, the one that uses equine therapy for wounded warriors. Dad mentioned it once. I've been mucking stalls, feeding horses, and mostly I've been learning to shut up and listen. Yesterday, Marcus, a veteran who lost both legs in Afghanistan, told me I reminded him of his son. Soft hands, hard head, he said. Then he taught me to bridle a horse named Warrior. Warrior only trusts people who approach with genuine respect. It took 6 hours. I cried twice. Warrior finally let me near when I stopped trying to prove something and just sat in his stall, quiet, waiting for permission to exist in his space. I think I understand now, not asking for anything, just wanted you to know. Scott. P.S. Sabrina filed for divorce. She kept the Mercedes. The pigs did $30,000 in damage to the interior. I read it 3 times sitting at that very kitchen table. Was this true growth or a new, more sophisticated manipulation? Adam always said redemption was a marathon, not a sprint. Time would tell. 2 days later, Ruth's voice crackled through the phone. You need to check Facebook. I rarely ventured into social media, but duty called. There it was. A grainy video, clearly filmed without Scott's knowledge. He was in a barn, smeared head to toe in mud and manure, wrestling with a bale of hay twice his size. He stumbled twice, took a non-serious but noticeable kick from a horse, an indignant snort echoing. Finally, he wrestled the hay into a stall, only for the horse to immediately begin scattering it everywhere. The caption read, Week 3 at Healing Hooves Veterans Ranch. Finally understand why my mum laughed when I said ranching was just feeding animals. This is Thor. He's teaching me humility. He's very good at his job. Mum, if you see this, I'm sorry for everything. The comments were a study in contrasts. Sabrina. This is why we're divorcing. Patricia. Waste of an MBA. But below them, a tide of others. Veterans thanking him for his help. The ranch director praising his work ethic. And Marcus. City boys getting there, slowly. I didn't reply. Not yet. A month later, another letter arrived. Mom. Today a veteran's wife told me about losing their farm while he was deployed. They'd raised horses for 20 years. Had to sell everything, including a stallion they'd birthed and raised. She cried, describing the sunrise over their pastures. I helped them fill out paperwork for a grant to start over. It's what I'm good at. Paperwork, finances, systems. But now I understand what the numbers mean. Each line item is a dream. A morning coffee watching horses, an evening listening to coyotes. I think about Dad every day now. About how he looked that last morning on the ranch, even with the chemo ravaging him, smiling at the mountains. He wasn't just looking at land. He was looking at love, made tangible. I was so stupid, Mom. So incredibly stupid. Still not asking for anything. Scott. That afternoon, Tom stopped by to mend a fence. Heard your boy's in Colorado, he said, his tone casual but his eyes were sharp. News travels. My cousin works at that veteran place. Says there's a city fellow there working harder than most. Doesn't complain, doesn't quit. Shows up at 4 a.m. without being asked. He paused, letting that sink in. He also heard he donated his entire commission from his last real estate deal to their therapy program. 6 figures. That was new. I kept my face impassive, but inside something profoundly shifted. 3 months in, the calls began. Not from Scott himself, but from others. The ranch director thanking me for raising a son who understood service. Marcus calling to say Scott had bought a therapy horse for a kid with autism, entirely out of his own pocket. A veteran's widow, grateful Scott had saved their family farm from foreclosure, pro bono. Then Ruth arrived, laptop open. You need to see this. It was a blog post Scott had written for the Veterans Ranch website, titled Authentic Ranch Life, A City Son's Education. He laid bare our weekend honestly, brutally, hilariously. He owned every shred of his entitlement, his disrespect, his greed. But the ending? That's what got me. My mother defended her dream with horses, llamas, and a mechanical bull that still stands in her yard. She taught me that authentic isn't Instagram-worthy sunsets and mason jar aesthetics. It's 4 a.m. feedings in -20-degree weather. It's holding your dying husband's hand while he watches his last sunrise over land you've bled for. It's choosing hard work over easy money every single day. I wanted to steal that from her to reduce her life's work to my profit margin. She gave me what I thought I wanted, authentic ranch life, and it broke me in the best possible way. If you're reading this, Mom, I get it now. Not fully, maybe never fully, but enough to know that what you and Dad built can't be bought or sold or inherited. It has to be earned, one sunrise at a time. P.S. Napoleon the llama was magnificent. Please tell the Hendersons. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I did something I hadn't done in 6 months. I called my son. Hello? His voice was tentative, laced with an unfamiliar vulnerability. "The Hendersons got a new llama," I began, my voice soft. "Named him Bonaparte. He's worse than Napoleon." Silence stretched, then a laugh, shaky but real, bubbled from his end. "God help us all. Tom says you're doing good work in Colorado." "Trying to, Mom. These veterans, what they've sacrificed, and then they come here and find peace with horses. It's like what Dad found at our ranch during his last months. That kind of peace is worth everything." "Yes," I said simply. "It is." "I've been thinking," he continued carefully, "about Thanksgiving, not asking to come to the ranch. I know I haven't earned that yet, but maybe dinner in town, just you and me. I could drive up from Colorado." I considered this. "The Riverside Diner does a decent turkey dinner. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Keep working, keep learning. Ask me again in November." "Fair enough, Mom. Yes. I love you." I should have led with that. "You should have led with a lot of things, Scott. But late is better than never." After I hung up, I walked to the pasture. Thunder waited, nickering softly, his massive head nudging my chest. I scratched his favourite spot behind his ears, thinking of second chances and the long, winding road to redemption. 2 weeks later, another surprise. A package arrived, Colorado postmarks stark against the brown paper. Inside, a professionally bound photo album. The title page read, "Adam Morrison, A Rancher's Legacy." Scott had somehow collected hundreds of photos I'd never seen. Adam at agriculture conferences, his presentations on sustainable farming, pictures from colleagues showing him mentoring young farmers, leading, teaching, photos from the feed store, the local diner, the veterinary clinic. Adam, everywhere, interwoven into the fabric of our small community, respected, beloved, remembered. The last page held a picture I'd taken myself 5 years ago but had forgotten. Adam and Scott, attempting to fix a fence together. Both were laughing. Scott holding a hammer wrong, Adam gently correcting his grip. Below it, Scott had written, "He tried to teach me. I refused to learn. My loss, not his. Thank you for protecting what he loved most. You and the ranch. I didn't deserve inheritance. Love isn't inherited anyway. It's earned." I sat on the porch, the album warm in my lap, as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Diablo, our barn cat, strutted by, pausing to eye me suspiciously before continuing his silent patrol. The mechanical bull stood silent in the garden, those black-eyed Susans a vibrant ring around its incongruous base. My phone rang. "Ruth, you okay, honey? Thanksgiving," I admitted, the word tasting like ash. "I might say yes to dinner. Adam would want you to." Adam. The name hung between us, heavy with memory. Indeed, Adam had wanted many things. Not all of them wise, but most flowed from a boundless kindness. Ruth was right. That relentless faith in people's capacity for change, it was Adam's greatest strength and his undoing. "I'll think about it," I said, a hollow promise. October fell like a shroud. Early snows swallowed the ranch in pristine white, muffling the world. The horses, sensing the shift, thickened their winter coats. I moved through the familiar rhythms of preparation, alone but not lonely. How could one be lonely here? Too much life throbbed beneath the surface, too much purpose in the quiet turning of seasons, too much stark beauty etched against the sky. Then Scott's third letter arrived. His handwriting, usually a sprawl, was compact. Urgent. "Mom," it began. "A boy came today. 15. Angry at everything. His dad died in Iraq when he was 3. His mom remarried an asshole," he said. He reminded me of myself. My chest tightened. All that anger with nowhere to go but inward or outward. Both destructive. The words blurred. Scott seeing himself in a lost boy. This was new. "I taught him to muck stalls," the letter continued. "He complained the entire time. Said it was stupid, pointless, beneath him. I just kept working beside him, remembering you doing the same that weekend, never rising to my bait, just consistently demonstrating what needed to be done. Hour 3, he finally asked why I volunteered here when I clearly had money. The BMW gave me away. I pictured Scott covered in grime, his expensive car glinting in the sunshine. A smile touched my lips, brittle with unshed tears. I told him about you, he wrote. About Dad, about the ranch, about learning too late that what looks like mundane work is actually love in action, that every stall cleaned makes space for healing, that dignity isn't about being above certain work, but about doing all work with purpose. The boys stopped complaining. They worked in silence after that. Good silence, Scott described, like you and Dad used to share. At the end, the boy asked to come back. Scott agreed, on condition he'd be there before the rooster crowed. He asked what time that was, Scott recounted. I said 4:30. He said his mom could drop him at 4 hours. A breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't just a letter. It was confession. An epiphany. Mum, Scott concluded, his penmanship suddenly fragile. I think I understand now why you didn't just tell me these things. Some lessons can't be taught, only learned. And they can't be learned without the work. Thank you for making me do the work. Your son, still learning. That night, I called him. Thanksgiving, I announced, no preamble. But not at the diner. Here, at the ranch. Silence stretched across the phone line, then a whisper. Really? You'll arrive the day before. You'll help with morning feeding. You'll sleep in the guest room, the cold one with the scratchy blankets. You'll help me cook using eggs from Diablo's harem. I paused, letting the severity sink in. And if you complain even once, you'll meet Bonaparte the llama. Mom, he choked out. Thank you, I won't let you down. You already have, I said, the words sharp but without malice. That's not the point anymore. The point is who you choose to be next. His voice, softer now, held a flicker of new resolve. I choose better. We'll see. I countered, hope a fragile thing I dared not fully embrace. November's chill deepened. The day before Thanksgiving, I watched from the kitchen window as Scott's BMW navigated the long gravel drive. He parked but didn't immediately get out. A full minute he sat there, a silhouette against the white landscape, gathering some unseen courage. Then he emerged. He was different, leaner, harder. Calloused hands, even from this distance, spoke of unfamiliar labour. He moved differently, tooless swagger, more grounded purpose. When Thunder, my old mare, whinnied from the pasture, Scott walked directly to the fence, offering an open hand. Thunder, that magnificent judge of character, considered him for a long moment, then nudged her velvet nose into his palm. Hi, Mom, Scott said as I stepped onto the porch. You're late, I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. Feeding started 10 minutes ago. He grinned then, a flash of white teeth against the wind-chapped skin, his father's grin a sight I hadn't seen in years. Then I better get to work. We worked side by side, a comfortable rhythm settling between us. Mucking stalls, distributing hay, checking water troughs. He knew what to do now, moving with an efficiency that bordered on ease. When Diablo, the arrogant rooster, strutted to challenge him by the coop, Scott stood his ground, waiting until the bird, realizing the futility, simply ambled away. That evening, as we chopped vegetables for tomorrow's feast, Scott asked, Did you really stay at the Four Seasons the whole time? Presidential suite. I met his gaze, a glint in my eye. Ruth and I had spa treatments twice a day. He laughed then, a rich, genuine sound that filled the small kitchen. That's genius. Evil genius, but genius. Your father would have enjoyed it, I mused. He always said I was too nice to you. He was right, Scott admitted. Yes, he usually was. We talked through dinner, not about the past, but about the vibrant present, the veterans he worked with, the horses he'd learned to read, the boy who now showed up every morning at 4 a.m., slowly healing through grit and horse wisdom. I'm seeing someone, he mentioned almost casually. A veterinarian. She volunteers at the ranch. Grew up on a cattle farm in Wyoming. He paused, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. And she says I'm soft, but salvageable. Smart woman, I murmured, a warmth spreading through me. She wants to meet you. Maybe Christmas. Maybe, I conceded. Let's get through Thanksgiving first. Later that night, I heard him get up several times, his footsteps soft in the hall. Each time they led to the barn, checking on the horses just as Adam used to do. Nature or nurture, it was finally finding its true expression. Thanksgiving morning broke crisp and clear. After morning chores, we retreated to the kitchen. Scott fumbled with the turkey, forgot timer settings, burned the dinner rolls with impressive dedication. But he tried, genuinely tried, without a single complaint or excuse. As we finally sat down to eat overcooked turkey, stubbornly lumpy gravy, slightly scorched vegetables, he raised his glass of apple cider. To Dad, he said, his voice thick. To you. To the ranch. To second chances I don't deserve, but I'm grateful for. To learning, I countered, meeting his gaze. However long it takes. We ate in a peaceful silence, watching the mountains outside the window. The mechanical bull, now incongruously draped in Christmas lights, stood sentinel in the garden. The horses grazed, serene. Diablo, for once, was quiet. Mom, Scott said suddenly, the shift in his tone pulling me from my reverie. I need to tell you something. I tensed, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. The development company. I didn't just inquire about the ranch's value. I had papers drawn up, power of attorney documents. I was going to... If you had shown any sign of decline, I was going to... I know, I said quietly, cutting him off. Mr. Davidson had told Ruth everything. How can you forgive that? He asked, his voice raw. I looked at my son, truly looked at him. Saw the shame etched on his face, the growth, the arduous struggle toward becoming the man his father had hoped he'd be. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Scott. It's choosing to move forward anyway. Your father taught me that during his illness. Every day he forgave his body for failing. Forgave the universe for the unfairness. Forgave himself for leaving me. I paused, letting the truth settle between us. Forgiveness is just another kind of work, like ranching. Exactly like ranching, he echoed, a nod of dawning comprehension. Daily, unglamorous, necessary. A understanding he couldn't have grasped 6 months ago. That afternoon, as we walked the sprawling property, he asked, the trust, the ranch going to the Hendersons, is that real? Yes, I confirmed. Good. He stopped walking, turning to face me. Good. It shouldn't be mine. I haven't earned it. Maybe someday I'll be worthy of being part of its legacy, but not through inheritance, through work, through showing up every day and proving I understand what it means. And what does it mean? I prompted, my heart swelling. He gazed out at the mountains, the grazing horses, the endless Montana sky. It means choosing love over money. Purpose over profit. Hard work over easy paths. It means being a steward, not an owner. Adam would have been proud, I thought. I am proud. The Hendersons need help with their carving season come spring, I mentioned casually. Are you inviting me to visit? He asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I'm suggesting you might want to learn about cattle. If you're going to understand ranching, really understand it, you need more than horses and llamas. Bonaparte, God help you. Yes. Bonaparte. As the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in fiery hues of amber and rose, he helped me with the last feeding of the day. Thunder accepted a carrot from his hand. Bella allowed him to brush her silky coat. Scout, ever the independent, remained aloof but didn't actively reject him. Progress. Thank you, Scott said as we walked back to the house, the cold air invigorating. For the lesson. The weekend from hell, the wake-up call, all of it. He looked at me, truly seeing me. Thank Tom and Miguel and the Petersons' rescue horses, and especially Napoleon. A llama changed my life. That's a sentence I never thought I'd say. We laughed, parent and child, walking together across land that would never be his in name, but might someday, with enough work and growth, be home again. That night, I found him on the porch despite the biting cold, staring up at the stars. "Dad did this, didn't he?" he murmured, his breath misting in the air. "Sat out here every night, even when he could barely walk. What did he think about? The future, the past, the moment, everything and nothing. I'm sorry I missed it," he said, his voice laced with regret. "Sorry I missed him. The real him, not the city version I preferred." "He's here," I said, gesturing at the vast darkness punctuated by brilliant stars. "In the land, the animals, the work, in you, when you choose to see it." Scott nodded, pulling his jacket tighter. "I choose to see it." And maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to. Christmas arrived in a fury of white, a blizzard that deserved national news if anyone outside rural Montana cared. 3 feet of snow in 18 hours, winds that could knock a grown man sideways, temperatures that froze the horse's water every 2 hours. Scott had been visiting monthly since Thanksgiving, each stay longer, each helping hand more capable. But this was his first real winter test. He'd arrived 3 days before, with Sarah, the veterinarian from Colorado, a woman who looked like she could birth a calf and attend the Met Gala with equal effortless grace. "You must be the famous Gail," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. "I've heard about the llama incident." "All lies," I declared, a smile tugging at my lips. "It was much worse than whatever he told you." She laughed, a rich, genuine sound that warmed the cold air. "He showed me the video, the one with Napoleon on the mechanical bull. I've watched it approximately 47 times. I decided immediately that I liked her. The blizzard struck that night. By morning we were properly snowed in. No power. No getting to the barn without digging a tunnel. Definitely no leaving the ranch. Sarah took it all in stride, but I watched Scott carefully. This was the test. Not llamas or roosters or even pig-destroyed Mercedes. This was the real thing. A pure, relentless Montana winter had clamped down. "We need to get to the horses," I said at 4 a.m., thrusting a shovel into Scott's hand. 3 hours of brutal digging later, a narrow trench finally led us to the barn. Sarah, a ghost in the pre-dawn gloom, shoveled beside us, humming a faint, incongruous Christmas carol. The horses, when we reached them, whickered a desperate symphony of cold, hunger, and worry. "Water heaters are frozen," I announced, the words hanging like crystalline death in the frigid air. "We'll haul buckets from the house every 2 hours." Scott's face, etched with exhaustion, tightened. "Every 2 hours? All day? All night? Until the temperature rises or the power comes back? That could be days." "Yes," I said, my gaze steady. I braced myself for the inevitable city boy protest, the clever, unworkable suggestion. Instead, he simply said, "I'll take the night shifts. You need your sleep." Sarah, silent until then, delivered a sharp, playful kick. "We'll take the night shifts together." And they did. For 3 days, like a rhythmic, weary heartbeat against the vast silence, I heard their trudge through the snow, the creak of ice underfoot, the muffled clanking of galvanized buckets, the warm gush of water from the wood stove I kept for emergencies. No complaints reached me, only the low murmur of conversation and, sometimes, brief, genuine laughter cutting through the biting cold. By day 2, a new shadow stretched across the ranch. The hay was running low. The delivery truck was a distant dream. Roads were impassable. The horses, sensitive to our anxieties, grew visibly nervous. "There's emergency hay at the Hendersons," I offered, tracing an invisible line through the swirling white. "But it's 2 miles through the storm. How do we get it here without a truck?" Sarah asked, her voice a fragile wisp. "The old way," I said, pointing to the sturdy, weathered sled Adam had restored so many winters ago. "We harness Thunder, haul it." Scott's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Thunder? The one who hated me for months? I nodded. The very same. He's done this before. Question is, will he do it for you? It was brutal. The blizzard howled, tearing at their clothes as Scott wrestled with the harness, his fingers stiffening into useless claws. The 2-mile trek through waist-deep snow was an odyssey. Loading the hay, each bale of frozen lead weight, was a test of pure will. The return journey, guiding a spooked, exhausted horse and precious cargo through the blinding storm, seemed impossible. Yet Scott made it back, both man and horse caked in ice, steam rising from their shivering forms. But something vital had shifted between them. An unspoken understanding, a hard-won respect, a tangible partnership. Dad would have been proud, I said softly, as Scott, oblivious to his own pain, meticulously rubbed Thunder down, his calloused hands seeking any sign of strain or injury beneath the horse's thick coat. I hope so, he replied, and for a moment I heard the echo of Adam's quiet humility in his voice. That night, Christmas Eve, the last vestige of normalcy shattered. Our stored water, meticulously rationed, froze solid. Sarah and I were melting snow over the wood stove when Scott vanished into the basement. An hour later, he emerged, triumphant and streaked with grime. Fixed it, he announced, a boyish grin splitting his mud-smeared face. Remember Dad teaching me about pipe insulation when I was 12? I was too busy playing video games to pay attention, but something must have stuck. The water flowed. Sarah kissed him deeply. I pretended not to wipe away a tear. Christmas morning dawned in a deadly silence, crystal clear and minus 37 degrees. The kind of cold that stole breath, shattered glass, and killed batteries. But the ranch still lived, and the horses still needed tending. Christmas or not, snow or no snow. We worked in 10-minute shifts, rotating in from the brutal cold to press against the wood stove's warmth. Ice formed on Thunder's whiskers. Bella's blanket froze to her body, requiring careful, agonizing thawing. But we managed, together. That afternoon, gathered around the wood stove, sharing canned soup, our Christmas dinner, Sarah's voice cut through the comfortable exhaustion. This, she said, looking at me, is what Scott described when he talks about his father. This kind of brutal, beautiful commitment to something bigger than yourself. Adam loved the difficult days most, I admitted, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. Said they showed you who you really were. Scott, genuinely curious, turned to me. Who are we then? I met his gaze. Today, we're ranchers. Real ones. Not Instagram ranchers or hobby farmers. The kind who do whatever it takes whenever it's needed, without thought of comfort or convenience. Even on Christmas. Especially on Christmas. Animals don't know it's a holiday. That evening, the power returned, announced by a stuttering flicker of lights and the comforting rumble of the furnace. Sarah, rummaging through an old trunk, found the photo album Scott had made of Adam. Is this him? She asked, pointing to a fading picture of a young Adam, grinning, covered in birthing fluids and straw, holding a newborn colt. First foal born on the ranch, I confirmed. Thunder came out fighting, knocked Adam flat on his back. Adam laughed for 20 minutes straight. Tell me more, Sarah said, settling in beside me, her eyes luminous in the soft lamplight. So I did. Stories poured out. Adam learning to ride at 55. Adam building the barn with his own calloused hands. Adam, even in his last winter, weakened by chemo, still breaking ice on water troughs every morning before dawn. He sounds wonderful, Sarah said softly, her hand finding Scott's. He was, Scott replied, his voice barely a whisper. I just couldn't see it then. I was too busy being embarrassed. His muddy boots at my college graduation, his old truck at my wedding, his stories about cattle at business dinners. Sabrina encouraged that, I said carefully, the first time his ex-wife's name had been uttered since the divorce. Scott's jaw tightened. Sabrina wanted me to be someone I'm not, someone I tried to be, and failed at spectacularly. Sarah, her gaze intense, leaned forward. "The question," she said, her voice clear and sure, "is who you want to be. Now." Before he could answer, a frantic sound ripped through the quiet Christmas night. A horse in distress. We burst into the barn to find Bella thrashing in her stall, clearly in colic. "It's bad," Sarah declared after a swift examination. "We need the vet. Immediately." Panic seized my throat. "Roads are still closed. Nearest vet is 40 miles out." Sarah, already pulling on her gloves, reminded us, "I'm a vet, but I need supplies, medications." "Doc Henderson has a kit," Scott said suddenly, remembering. "Big Jim mentioned it at Thanksgiving, for emergencies when the roads are blocked." My heart sank. That's 3 miles in the opposite direction, in the dark, in this cold. He was gone before I could protest, throwing a bridle over Thunder. Then I better get moving. Thunder, the only one strong enough for another impossible journey through the deepening snow, seemed to understand. Sarah and I stayed with Bella, walking her when she could stand, monitoring her fading vitals, praying. Colic could kill a horse in hours. Every minute Scott was gone stretched into an eternity. He made it back in 90 minutes, an impossible time that meant he'd run parts of the distance himself, sparing Thunder. His face was frostbitten, his hands barely functional, but he held the medical kit. Sarah worked through the endless night. Scott and I took turns walking Bella, holding her head when the pain became unbearable, whispering promises and prayers into her ear. At dawn, just as the first sliver of weak sun touched the horizon, the crisis passed. Bella would live. "You did that," Sarah told Scott, who sat on a hay bale, utterly spent, steam rising from his soaked clothes in the cold barn air. "That run probably saved her life." He merely shook his head, his voice hoarse. "Dad would have done it faster." "No," I said firmly, meeting his gaze. "He wouldn't have. You matched him, Scott. Maybe even exceeded him." He looked at me, surprise blooming in his exhausted eyes. "Really?" That evening, after 16 hours of crisis and resolution, we sat in the warm kitchen. Sarah, resourceful even with meagre supplies, cooked something elaborate. Scott, finally given Adam's journal that morning, was engrossed in its pages. "He wrote about me," Scott said, his voice thick with emotion. "Scott called today, tried to explain the ranch again. He didn't understand. Maybe someday." Entry after entry, variations of the same fragile hope. "He never gave up on you," I said simply. "Even when he should have. Parents don't give up. We wait. We hope. Sometimes we set elaborate traps involving llamas." Sarah laughed from the stove, a warm, rich sound. The llama trap should be taught in parenting classes. It was more improvisation than plan, I admitted. "The best revenge always is," she said, and I knew unequivocally that I liked this woman. After dinner, Scott rose abruptly. "I need to show you something." He returned with a manila envelope, his hands trembling slightly as he offered it to me. Inside were legal documents, complex ones that took me a moment to decipher. "It's a conservation easement," he explained, his voice gaining strength. "I've been working with the land trust people. If you agree, it protects the ranch forever. No development, no subdivision, no matter who owns it. It stays agricultural land, in perpetuity. And there's a tax benefit that would help with the mounting costs." I stared at the papers, then at him. "You did this." He nodded, earnestness etched on his face. I wanted to fix what I tried to break, to protect what Dad loved, what you love. The trust naming the Hendersons is good, but this is ironclad. Even they couldn't sell to developers if they wanted to. I looked him over, the fatigue in his eyes, the new confidence in his posture. This must have taken months. "Since October," he confirmed, "Sarah helped with the ecological surveys." My gaze moved between them. My son, transformed by hard work and genuine humility, and this remarkable woman who saw his true potential. "There's one more thing," Scott continued, his voice softer now. Page 12. I flipped to it. A provision naming Scott as assistant ranch manager if he completed a 2-year agricultural program and worked the ranch for 5 consecutive years, maintaining the land according to strict conservation guidelines. Not inheriting, he said quickly. Earning it? Maybe. If you'll have me. 5 years is a long time, I said carefully, testing him. It's a start, he replied, his eyes burning with a new resolve. Dad gave the ranch 40 years. I can give it 5 or 50. Whatever it takes. I signed the papers. Sarah whooped, a joyous sound that echoed through the quiet house. Scott cried. Really cried. For the first time since Adam's funeral, that night, sleep eluded me. I found Scott in the barn with Thunder, brushing the great horse, talking to him quietly about plans for spring, about learning to train colts, about proving himself worthy of this land. Thunder, my stubborn particular horse, who barely tolerated anyone but me, rested his massive head on Scott's shoulder. He forgives you, I said from the doorway, stepping into the barn's soft light. Do you? I thought about it, truly thought about it. About Scott, the entitled city boy who'd tried to steal my home. About Scott, the desperate man covered in llama spit and horse manure. About Scott, the emerging rancher who had risked frostbite to save Bella's life. Forgiveness is ongoing, I said finally, my gaze meeting his. Like ranch work. You do it every day, and some days it's easier than others. What kind of day is today? He smiled, Adam's smile finally grown into his own face. A good one. A very good one. Mom, he began, then hesitated, a familiar glint in his eye. I need to tell you something. I finished the sentence for him, a smile spreading across my face. Sarah and I are getting married. The ring's in your pocket. You've been fidgeting with it all day. He laughed, a deep, joyful sound that promised a lifetime of springtimes. That obvious to someone who changed your diapers? I asked. Scott just smiled. Yes, we want to do it here at the ranch, in spring, when everything's green. He paused, then, Napoleon can be ring-bearer. God, no. Bonaparte, maybe. He seems calmer. Bonaparte ate Mrs. Henderson's wedding roses last week. A regular ring-bearer, then, I conceded. We stood together in the vast, still barn. The horses, deep in their own nighttime reveries, breathed softly in their stalls. Around us the scent of hay and old wood hung heavy, a visceral reminder of all our ranch had been and all it was becoming. It felt as if the ghosts of better days weren't haunting us but merging with the present, solidifying into a future we were actively building. Your father would be so proud, I murmured, my voice catching slightly, of who you're becoming. Scott shook his head, a familiar humility in his eyes. Not who I am yet. None of us are who we are yet. We're all becoming. Even at 67, I'm still becoming, I agreed, looking around the barn, at the faint dust motes dancing in the moonlight filtering through the high windows. Becoming what? I thought. Patient, forgiving, strong enough to defend my boundaries, but wise enough to lower them when someone earns passage. Have I earned it? He asked, as if reading my thoughts. You're earning it. Present continuous tense. Every bucket of water hauled, every fence mended, every dawn feeding in sub-zero weather. It never ends, does it? The earning. A weary smile touched his lips. No. And that's the beautiful part. There's always another chance to prove yourself. Another day to choose correctly. Another season to grow into. The barn settled back into its quiet rhythm, punctuated only by the horses' breathing and the wind's low whistle around the eaves. Somewhere in the main house, Sarah was probably already submerged in plans for a ranch wedding. Knowing her, it would be a perfect blend of practical elegance. I love you, Mom, Scott said, the words quiet but firm. I should have said it more, should have shown it better. You're showing it now. That's what matters. And it did. In the end, the ranch didn't care about past failures or future promises. It only cared about this present moment. The water that needed hauling now, the hay that needed distributing now, the love that needed expressing now. Scott, I realized, understood that finally, and perhaps that understanding was the real inheritance Adam had left us both. Spring arrived like a resurrection. The snow didn't just melt, it vanished in dramatic torrents, transforming our usually placid creek into a roaring, untamed river. The pastures, once dormant, exploded into a green so vivid it almost hurt your eyes. A vibrant, living thing that promised abundance. And the animals? Oh, the animals went absolutely mad with joy. Even Diablo, our notoriously curmudgeonly Roosty, seemed less homicidal, though even in his exuberance, he did manage to chase the wedding planner off the property twice. Yes, the wedding planner. Sarah had hired someone from Billings. She arrived in a gleaming white Range Rover, wearing heels that immediately sank into the spring mud, leaving perfect, impractical indentations. Her gaze swept over the mechanical bull, which still sported its Christmas lights and, to add insult to injury, a bird's nest nestled perfectly in its control panel. "Can we remove that eyesore?" she'd asked, her voice tight with professional disdain. "That," I told her, gesturing grandly, "is a monument to authenticity. It stays. The aesthetic, as you call it, is Montana Ranch meets Colorado veterinarian meets Reform City boy. If you can't work with that, you're at the wrong wedding." She quit. Sarah, with a pragmatism I admired, hired her sister instead. This one arrived in a muddy pickup, a cooler of beer, and a binder brimming with what she called realistic ranch wedding ideas. Scott had moved into the renovated barn apartment back in January. He was working the ranch full-time, the calluses on his hands thickening daily, while burning the midnight oil on online agriculture courses. I'd often find him at 2 a.m., laptop open, a textbook on soil management balanced precariously next to him, as he bottle-fed an orphaned calf we'd named Hope. "You don't have to do everything at once," I'd told him one morning, after he'd drifted asleep mid-feed, still propped against the stall door. "Dad did," he replied, his eyes still heavy with sleep but sharp with conviction. During chemo, he was still learning, still working, still planning. He looked away for a moment, then continued, his voice softer. "I found his notebooks, crop rotation schedules for the next decade, breeding plans for the horses, sketches for a greenhouse he never built. Your father was stubborn to a fault. It wasn't stubbornness," Scott said quietly, his gaze sweeping over the sleeping calf. "It was love. Every plan was a promise that the ranch would continue, that you'd have what you needed, that the dream wouldn't die with him." He was right. Adam's notebooks, which I'd finally shared with Scott, were less agricultural documents and more love letters to the future. Detailed instructions for everything from treating founder-in horses to the precise timing for planting heirloom tomatoes at our altitude. 2 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck. Not llamas or pigs this time, but a late spring blizzard, the kind that rips through the nascent season, killing newborn calves and annihilating early gardens. The Weather Service, in its detached way, called it a once-in-a-century event. The Hendersons lost 12 calves. The Petersons' entire greenhouse collapsed. We were luckier. The horses were safe, the chickens only mildly traumatized. But the wedding tent, the grand centerpiece of Sarah's vision, had collapsed under the weight of the snow. The carefully cultivated wildflower meadow, where she dreamt of exchanging vows, was now a deep icy pond. And the access road, our only lifeline to the outside world, had washed out completely. "We could postpone," Sarah suggested, though I could see the words tore at her. "Absolutely not," Scott declared, his jaw set. "We're ranchers. We adapt." And adapt they did. The ceremony moved to the barn. Tom and Miguel, working with a relentless energy born of friendship and caffeine, spent 3 days cleaning and decorating the cavernous space with strings of lights that cast a warm golden glow on the old wood. The drowned wildflower meadow found its replacement in hay bales arranged in a welcoming circle. The washed-out road, an undeniable obstacle, was repurposed. Guests would now park a mile away and take a hayride to the ranch. Big Jim Henderson, his usual gruff demeanour softened by the impending nuptials, volunteered his team of Clydesdales for transport, majestic beasts pulling simple wagons. The morning of the wedding, I found Scott in Thunder's stall. He was fully dressed in his suit, a tailored dark fabric, but covered by a protective apron. He worked with a meticulous, almost reverent focus, brushing the powerful horse to a gleaming perfection. "He's part of the ceremony," Scott explained without looking up. "Sarah's riding in on him." "Thunder? Our Thunder, who used to knock you into water troughs," I managed, imagining the chaos. Scott finally looked at me, a soft smile playing on his lips. "We've come to an understanding. He tolerates my existence and I worship his magnificence." "Sounds like your father's relationship with Diablo. Did Dad ever win that rooster over?" "The day before he died, Diablo let him collect eggs without attacking," Scott said, a faraway look in his eyes. "I think it was the rooster's version of saying goodbye." He stopped brushing, his hands still on Thunder's flank. "Tell me about that day. His last day." So I did. I told him how Adam had insisted on morning chores despite barely being able to walk without help. How he'd sat on the porch for hours, committing every curve of the distant mountains, every shimmer of the creek, to memory. How he'd written letters to Scott, letters I'd never sent because they contained forgiveness for transgressions Scott hadn't even committed yet, as if Adam had known what was coming. "Do you still have them?" Scott asked, his voice low. "In the safe? Wedding present, maybe." "Mom, that's—" His voice trailed off, overcome. "Thank you." The ceremony itself was perfect in its imperfection. Sarah, radiant in her dress, did indeed ride in on Thunder, who had flowers braided incongruously into his mane, and looked deeply offended by the indignity of it all. Diablo, seizing his moment, escaped his pen and strutted proudly down the aisle during the vows, sending the city relatives scurrying for higher ground. Bonaparte the llama watched the entire spectacle from a barn window, occasionally humming his disapproval. But when Scott and Sarah exchanged their vows they'd written themselves, promises to work beside each other through blizzards and droughts, to find beauty in difficult days, to build something lasting on land that demanded everything, there wasn't a dry eye in the barn. Even the Hendersons cried, though Big Jim, ever macho, claimed it was just allergies. The reception took place around the mechanical bull, which Sarah's sister had ingeniously wrapped in white lights and adorned with wildflowers rescued from the flood. The city relatives looked on in horror, but the ranch folks thought it was brilliant, a true testament to our spirit. "Is that the famous bull?" Marcus asked, approaching me. He'd driven up from Colorado with 6 other veterans from the therapy ranch. "The very one," I confirmed. "Napoleon blessed it with his presence." Marcus grinned. "Scott tells that story at least once a week. Gets better every time. How's he doing down there?" He nodded south toward the Colorado ranch. "Really?" I asked, surprised by the sudden shift in tone. "He's one of the best volunteers we've had," Marcus said, his voice serious now. "Shows up. Shuts up. Does the work. The horses trust him. More importantly, the veterans trust him. Your boy learned something important. What's that? How to earn respect instead of expecting it." As if summoned by the compliment, Scott appeared with Sarah, both of them flushed and laughing from dancing. "Mom," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling, "we have something to tell you." My heart sank. They were leaving. Of course. Young couple. Opportunities elsewhere. "We're pregnant," she blurted out, unable to contain it any longer. "Due in December." The world tilted. A grandchild. Here. On the ranch. "A baby," I said, stupidly, the word echoing in the vast barn. "Here, if you'll have us," Scott added quickly. "The barn apartment's too small, but we could add on, or build something new." "Or your father's office," I interrupted, the words tumbling out. "I've been using it for storage. It could be a nursery." Both of them stared, silent. "You'd want us in the house?" Scott finally managed. Babies need grandmothers, I countered, feeling a sudden, overwhelming surge of love. Grandmothers need babies, and this house needs life in it again. Sarah hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. Scott just stood there, stunned, a slow smile spreading across his face. Dad would have loved this, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. He would have been impossible, I corrected, already mentally buying miniature cowboy boots and planning which gentle horse would be the baby's first ride. Thunder's too old by then, Scott said seriously, but Bella's gentle enough. The baby won't be riding horses for years. 2 years minimum, Sarah agreed. And I realized with a laugh that I was outnumbered by people who thought 2-year-olds on horseback was perfectly reasonable. Ranch people. My people now. The party continued past midnight. At some point, someone, probably Tom, after too much beer, activated the mechanical bull. The veterans took turns trying to conquer it, whooping and hollering, their laughter echoing through the barn. Even Bonaparte, observing from his window, seemed impressed, though he expressed it in his usual way, by spitting on anyone who scored less than 8 seconds. I found myself on the porch with Patricia, of all people, Scott's former mother-in-law who'd arrived wearing what looked like designer boots, clearly bought specifically for a ranch wedding. "I owe you an apology," she said stiffly, her gaze fixed on the glittering expanse of stars. "You owe me nothing." "I do. I encourage the worst in them. In Scott, in Sabrina. I thought ranching was beneath them, beneath you." She gestured vaguely at the scene unfolding inside the barn. Scott teaching Marcus's daughter to line dance, Sarah examining someone's horse with professional intensity, even in her wedding dress. The mountains loomed dark against a sky so bright with stars, it seemed fake. And now I think I missed the point of everything. A deep sigh escaped her. Sabrina remarried, you know. Investment banker. They live in a penthouse that costs more than this ranch. She paused, then added, almost whispered, "She's miserable." "I'm sorry to hear that," I offered genuinely. Patricia shook her head. "Don't be. She chose surface over substance." The soft rasp of a llama's rough tongue against the window pane brought Patricia back to reality. They both did, but Scott, he found his way back. He earned his way back, I corrected gently, watching Bonaparte's long neck extend for a stray leaf. "There's an important difference," Patricia nodded, her gaze fixed on the endless Montana sky. Adam would be proud. A flicker of something, perhaps regret, crossed her face. I never really knew Adam, did I? "No," I admitted, a ghost of a smile touching my lips, "but I saw how he looked at you, like he'd won the lottery every single day. Scott looks at Sarah that way now." And she was right. Across the sun-drenched yard, Scott spun Sarah, their laughter echoing as Diablo, our notoriously demanding rooster, pecked at their feet, likely demanding tribute. "Stay the night," I offered, a risky gambit. "Guest rooms have improved since your last visit. No more rescue horses in the living room." She laughed then, a genuine unburdened sound, the first I'd ever truly heard from Adam's sister. "Only on special occasions, I suppose." The sound was like music. "I just might take you up on that. These boots are killing me." "There are muck boots in the mudroom," I said, hoping. Size 8, 7.5. Close enough for ranch work. Her eyebrows arched. "Is that an invitation to morning chores?" 4:30 sharp. Diablo waits for no one. A groan, then a sigh. "God help me, I'm actually considering it." She stayed. And she showed. The next morning, Patricia stumbled into the pre-dawn chill, clad in one of Adam's old barn jackets and his still muddy work boots. She was terrible at it, of course. Skittish around the chickens, utterly baffled by the feed proportions, and utterly terrorized by Bonaparte, who seemed to have a sixth sense for her fear. But she tried. She truly tried. "This is harder than CrossFit," she panted, wrestling a hay bale only half her size. "Ranch fit is different from gym fit," I agreed, wiping sweat from my brow. "Ask Scott about his first month. He mentioned something about crying in the barn, multiple times. Character-building tears," I offered with a grin. As the sun crested the mountains, bathing the landscape in liquid gold, Patricia stood transfixed. "It's beautiful," she whispered, as if seeing it for the very first time. "I mean, I saw it before, but I didn't really see it." "That's the thing about ranch life," I said, my voice soft. "It's too hard to appreciate if you're not doing the work. The beauty is earned. Like respect." "Exactly like respect," she murmured. Just then, Scott and Sarah emerged from the house, still sleepy but beaming. Sarah's hand instinctively rested on her still flat stomach, protective and proud. Scott met my gaze and I saw Adam's eyes looking back at me, full of plans and promises. "Morning, Mom," he said. "Ready for chores?" "Always," I replied, and for the first time in years, truly meant it. 4 generations, I realized. They would work this land. Adam's dreams hadn't died. They'd just taken a scenic detour through llama-induced chaos to find their way home. "Oh," Scott added, almost as an afterthought. "Bonaparte got out again. He's in the vegetable garden." "Of course he is," I sighed, a familiar weariness and affection in my voice, already reaching for the llama halter. Some things never change, and on a ranch, that's oddly comforting. The mechanical bull, still and silent in the dawn light, was covered in wedding flowers and bird droppings, a testament to the beautiful absurdity of making people confront exactly what they claimed to desire. In the distance, Diablo crowed, heralding another day of small disasters and even smaller, more profound miracles. This was ranch life. Real, authentic, difficult, beautiful. And finally, my son was home. December arrived with a gentleness unusual for Montana, as if the very weather understood our need for mercy. Sarah, 8 months pregnant, moved with the majestic grace of a ship under full sail. She still insisted on checking the horses twice daily, despite barely being able to glimpse her own feet. Scott, in turn, had blossomed in ways that continued to astonish me. He'd taken over the ranch's financial reins, quickly discovering that we'd been hemorrhaging money on feed and equipment rentals. Within 6 months, he'd renegotiated contracts, sourced superior suppliers, and, miraculously, boosted our savings while simultaneously streamlining operations. "It's just spreadsheets, Mom," he'd shrugged when I expressed my amazement. "But now they're spreadsheets that smell like horse manure." The nursery glowed, ready. Adam's old office, reborn with pale yellow walls, now housed furniture Scott had built himself, meticulously honing his carpentry skills from YouTube tutorials and lessons from old Big Jim Henderson. The pine crib, solid enough for generations, stood beneath Adam's favorite photograph. Our family at Scott's college graduation, even Adam's muddy boots visible at the edge of the frame. 3 days before the due date, I awoke to the telltale hum of pre-dawn panic. Scott was already in the kitchen at 3 a.m., fully dressed and pacing the worn linoleum. "She's in labor," he stated, his voice tight. "Wants to finish morning chores first." Of course she does. We found Sarah in the barn, timing contractions with the practiced nonchalance of a seasoned ranch hand as she filled water buckets. Between waves she lectured Thunder, our oldest mare, on proper hoof care. "Hospital," Scott insisted, his voice firm. "After chores," Sarah countered, a challenge in her eyes. "Scott, your father worked this ranch until the day he went into hospice. I can finish morning feeding." In that moment, I saw the truth dawn on Scott. He had married his father's spiritual daughter. The recognition was both beautiful and terrifying. We compromised. Sarah supervised from a hay bale while Scott and I did the work. With every contraction, she'd grip the rough bale, breathing through it, Bella, the barn cat, watching with concerned eyes. 5 minutes apart, I finally announced, my voice brooking no argument. "Hospital? Now?" The drive to Billings typically took 2 hours on a good day. This was not a good day. Fresh snow began falling thick and fast. Scott drove, his knuckles white on the wheel, while Sarah squeezed his hand so hard I heard them crack. I sat in the back, calling the hospital, praying we'd make it. We almost didn't. 40 minutes from the hospital, Sarah declared, "The baby's coming. Now." "Now?" Scott's voice cracked like a teenager's. He pulled over. We were in the middle of nowhere, snow blanketing the world, cell service flickering. This was every ranch parent's nightmare, yet somehow perfectly fitting. "I've delivered hundreds of calves," Sarah panted. "How different can it be?" "Very different," Scott and I chorused, a single desperate breath. But Sarah was right about one thing. The baby wasn't waiting. With the unwavering confidence of someone who had handled far worse situations with large animals, she talked us through it. Scott caught his son in shaking hands just as the ambulance we'd managed to call arrived, its siren a distant, then rapidly approaching wail. Adam Robert Morrison. 8 pounds, 3 ounces. Born in a pickup truck during a snowstorm, already screaming his opinions about everything. "Just like his grandfather," I said, watching the baby's furious red face. "Adam came out arguing, too." The EMTs took over, but the baby was perfect. Pink, loud, and absolutely perfect. Sarah was triumphant, Scott in shock. "Did we just deliver our baby on Highway 287? He asked, bewildered. "We did," Sarah confirmed, a wild grin on her face. "Put it in the baby book. Location of birth, Ford F-150, mile marker 47. At the hospital, after everyone was checked and declared healthy, I held my grandson for the first time. He had Scott's nose, Sarah's chin, and Adam's eyes, that particular shade of blue-green that shifted with the light. "Hi, little one," I whispered, pressing a kiss to his soft head. "Welcome to the chaos." He gripped my finger with surprising strength, as if already preparing for the work ahead. 2 days later, we brought him home to the ranch. The animals seemed to sense something momentous had occurred. Even Diablo was subdued, pecking gently at the ground instead of launching his usual attacks. Thunder whinnied softly as we passed, a low, rumbling greeting for the newest member of the herd. That first night, I found Scott in the nursery at 2 a.m., not because the baby was crying, but because he was reading from Adam's journal. "March 15th, Scott read quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Helped birth a calf today. Difficult delivery, but mother and baby survived. Scott called from Chicago. Closed a big deal. Sounded happy. Wish he could have seen the calf. There's something about watching life begin that puts everything in perspective. Maybe someday he'll understand." "He would have loved this," I said from the doorway. "A grandchild on the ranch." "I wasted so much time, Mom." His confession hung heavy in the air. "No," I corrected gently, stepping into the room to lay a hand on his shoulder. "You took the long way home. Entirely different thing." Christmas arrived a week later, our first as a complete family in years. Sarah's parents, ranch people themselves, arrived from Wyoming, immediately falling into the rhythm of our life. Big Jim and Dolly Henderson stopped by with a handmade rocking horse. Tom and Miguel brought their families for Christmas dinner. And Bonaparte. Somehow Bonaparte got into the house. "How does he keep doing this?" Scott demanded, trying to herd the llama away from the twinkling Christmas tree. "He's Bonaparte," I said, as if that explained everything. Which honestly it did. The baby, nestled in his bouncer, watched the chaos with wide, curious eyes. 6 days old and already mesmerized by the charming insanity of ranch life. Sarah's father, Robert, regaled us with stories about his own ranch childhood. My mother always said babies born in barns or trucks were blessed with an understanding of animals. Old wives' tale. But you'd be surprised how often it proves true. After dinner, with everyone gathered and Bonaparte finally exiled to the porch, I stood to make a toast. Adam always said the ranch wasn't about the land or the animals. It was about family, the one you're born into and the one you choose. This year, we chose to become the family he always believed we could be. My gaze settled on Scott holding his son, with Sarah leaning into him. It took mechanical bulls, rescue horses, and a particularly vindictive rooster, but we made it home. To Dad, Scott said, raising his glass, his voice thick with a love that transcended memory. To Adam, everyone echoed, a chorus of peace. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle this time. Through the window, I could see the mechanical bull, now adorned with Christmas lights and a Santa hat. Someone, probably Tom, had transformed it into a monument to the summer that had changed everything. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, I found myself in the barn with Thunder. He was getting old, moving slower but still magnificent. We did it, old friend, I told him, stroking his velvet nose. We survived. We thrived. We brought them home. He nickered softly, pushing his great head against my shoulder. In the distance, a coyote howled and an owl answered. The ranch sang its nighttime chorus, the same as always but also completely different. Because now it sang for 4 generations, past, present, and future. I thought about Adam, about what he'd say if he could see us now. Probably something practical like, check the water heaters, or, that baby needs warmer pajamas. But underneath it all, I knew there would be pride, joy, the quiet satisfaction of dreams not just preserved, but expanded. My phone buzzed. A text from Scott. Baby's first sunrise tomorrow. Want to join us? The text glowed in the pre-dawn dark. Always, I typed back, and I would. Every sunrise, every feeding, every small disaster, every smaller miracle. Because that's what family does. That's what ranchers do. That's what love looks like when it's dressed in muck boots, carrying water buckets at 4 a.m. Out in the silent, swirling snow, the mechanical bull stood frozen, a metallic leviathan that had fulfilled its strange, unexpected purpose. It had forced authenticity upon those who needed it most. A bizarre, grunting teacher. Now it deserved its rest, a monument to creative justice. Its iron hide a reminder that sometimes the sharpest response to entitlement arrived with a side of llama spit. 5 years from now, little Adam, my grandson, would probably be straddling Thunder's successor. 10 years on, he'd be squabbling with Diablo's offspring over who got to collect the eggs. 20 years? Who could say? Maybe he'd chase bigger dreams in the city, far from the dust and demands of ranch life. And that would be all right because he'd carry the indelible blueprint of home within him. Not as an inheritance, but an investment. Not ownership, but stewardship. Not ease, but a profound sense of worth. But tonight, this quiet December evening, with snow whispering against the window panes and my family sleeping safely under one roof, I had everything Adam, my son, and I had ever dreamed of. It was different from our plans, harder than we'd ever imagined, yet infinitely better than we'd hoped. Tomorrow would greet us with its own challenges, horses to feed, bills to pay, a baby to raise, a ranch to run. But also, a sunrise painting the mountains in fire and gold, coffee shared with my son, Sarah's irrepressible laughter, a grandchild's first gummy smile, and the continued baffling absence of Bonaparte from his pen. I walked back to the house, pausing by the mechanical bull. Its head was dusted with fresh snow like powdered sugar. Thank you, I whispered, the words lost in the vast cold air. Thank you to the night, to Adam's enduring memory, to the universe itself for conspiring to teach my son, through chaos, what comfort never could. Inside, warmth and light bloomed, beckoning me toward family. Outside, the ranch kept its eternal, vigilant watch, demanding everything, yet somehow giving back even more. This was my authentic life, hard-earned, fiercely protected, finally completely shared. And in that moment, it was perfect. If this echo of the old house still resonates within you, please illuminate its memory with a like. Join our quiet congregation with a subscription. And in the shadowed space below, whisper, what score, from 0 to 10, would you give my hospitality to the uninvited? Remember, the truest inheritance isn't always etched in stone or willed on parchment. but forged in the stark lessons we impart.